Sunday morning, 10:30, well, 10:35, but close enough. From the Solward's house, half a block from the aisle, we want to thank our guests in person from New Jersey and from California and from anywhere else. Come on in. You're just in time. We're just starting. And where are you coming from today? Queens. You're locals. Okay. All right. Yeah, come on. We have like the ladies section over here, the men over here. Okay. Help yourself to some coffee, get some bagels and lox in the back. A whole nice setup over here. And we never know who's showing up. It's a different crowd every time. Really, Mom, it's a different crowd every time. So we might need more chairs in the ladies section. You'll take care of that? Okay. So my son manages the house. That's his side hustle. His real thing is he manages the Shluchim office building on Eastern Parkway. But he also helps his father with the Solward's house. Okay. We have a very long Sicha or Sichas today. Just to put it in perspective, I'm looking at the table of contents and Bereshis was like 3 pages. Noach was 11 pages. Lech Lecha was 8 pages. Vayera was 8 pages. Chayei Sarah is a whopping 14 pages. But that's nothing because next week, Parshas Chayei is 15 pages. And JFYI next week is also the Kinnis HaShluchim banquet. And they now do the Kinnis banquet. Why does this say like this? Did we just lose the feed? What's going on? What happened there? What happened? Do you know what happened? Okay. The next week is the Kinnis HaShluchim banquet, and they now do the Kinnis HaShluchim in the middle of the day instead of dinner. It's a lunch, so I'll try to hurry next week and finish in time to head to the banquet. Okay, you got it all fixed? Could you tell me what the problem was? You're not sure what happened? It's because you got up and walked away? You pressed a button? Oh, you pressed a button. Okay, fine. Okay, Parshas Chayei Sarah, let's do it. In Untitled Chapter. Okay, this first Sicha is, you know how you know when the Sicha was actually said? You go to the end of it and you look in the little. Can you pull up the thing, Majeg? Can you go to like page? Yeah, can you pull up the actual Sicha and go to like the end of the first Sicha? Go to page 34. Yeah, right there. Okay, you had it. Okay, so if you look at the top of the page, like right after that first top paragraph, by first I mean the first column, meaning the right column, because we're reading right to left because it's Yiddish. Yeah, exactly. Where Yisrael is using the cursor to circle around. Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Chayei Sarah Tavshin Yud Aleph. That's how you know when the Sicha was actually said. That means Chayei Sarah Tavshin Yud Aleph. We're talking about the year of Yud Shvat. You know, we're talking about the Frierdiker Rebbe's Histalkus was Yud Shvat Tavshin Yud. The Rebbe's Mekam on the Siyas. Yud Shvat Tavshin Yud Aleph. So we're talking about in that first year after the Frierdiker Rebbe's passing, before the Rebbe is officially accepting the leadership. That's when the Sicha is from. Okay, and it's a very, very, very fundamental concept. In Chassidus in general, it's a one of the radical but foundational concepts of Torah B'aal Shem Tov, and especially of the seventh generation of the Rebbe's teachings. Okay, and you'll see what it is. Well, I'll just tell you what it is. A spoiler alert. It's about the importance of physicality and the body, which is a Mashiach concept. Okay, Aleph. In the Heidnike Seder steht, "V'Tama Sarah b'Kris Arba hi Chevron be'Eretz Canaan." In this week's parsha, it says in the beginning of Chayei Sarah that Sarah passed away in Kiryas Arba. That's a name of a town, Kiryas Arba, which is also called Chevron, where Be'eretz Canaan, in the land of Canaan. Taish de Zayir, as Sarah is a remez undite of dem Guf, and Avraham of the Neshama. In the Zohar, it says, that every story in Chumash has a literal level, like it's telling us actually what happened. These are not, God forbid, mythological characters. This is an actual story of our ancestors. And then also, there are multiple other levels that these narratives are describing. For instance, the spiritual goings-on in spiritual realms, which are simultaneously being described by the very same stories. So the Zohar, which is on the level of Sod, the secrets of the Torah, the most spiritual and abstract level, says that this story, it's an actual story. Avraham lost his wife, Sarah, and he buried her, and he went to cry for her. But also, it's describing the relationship between the body and the soul. And Avraham represents the soul, and Sarah represents the body. Come on in. We need more. We're going to have to kick the men out of the main section, put the women in there, because we have more women than men. Baruch Hashem. Can I scooch over to the left? 2 inches. Good? And my mic. Okay, fine. Gewaldig. All right. Baruch Hashem, we have a big crowd today. We never know. It's like, Thursday night we had here at the Soulwords House 2 different campus groups. And because it's the Pegisha this weekend. Pegisha is the college campuses bring students to Crown Heights for Shabbos. Anyways, I felt like campus shliach today went, yeah, you know what I'm going to say, because they never know how many people to cook for, because college students never RSVP. So Yisrael asked me about the bagel order. I said, I don't know. We never know. We could have a full house. We could have nobody. Okay, we never know. Okay, Baruch Hashem. But if you guys show up, that means I eat less bagels afterwards, which is less carbs for me, which is actually healthier for me. So if you care about my health, you'll show up here and eat the bagels, please. Okay. Anyways, Sarah is the body. Avraham is the soul. Yeah. And that's what the Zohar says. So what happens? And das is, sagt der Zohar, v'tama Sarah. This is what it means. Sarah passed away. As wenn der Guf starbt, the body passes away, dies. Where? Bekiryas arba. Kiryas arba, was besteht von de 4 Yesodis. A body, or any physical thing, is a composition of 4 elements, the 4 elements that make up the physical world. You can learn about it in the Rambam's Hilchos Yesodei Torah. It tells us about how the world works. The fire, air, water, earth. The Rebbe actually in a letter, an English letter I saw once, explains that there are actually 4 states of matter. Because somebody said, I saw the periodic chart of elements. There's way more than 4 elements. The Rebbe says, they're not the same elements. Just because we translate Yesodis as elements, it's not the same terminology. He actually says it's closer to the 4 states of matter, which, so Aish would be plasma, and air would be gas, and water would be liquid, and earth would be solid. At any rate, so the 4, by the hair drip, turn off, the water bill was really high. I'm not going to, it's a China's water torture. I can't concentrate. So the 4 Yesodes break apart. He Chevron. So Chevron, not Chevron gas stations, but Chevron is the word chibur. So there's Kiryas Arba, Hi Chevron, which means the 4 elements that were stuck together literally disintegrate, like the decomposition of the body. Was Kolzman hat gelebt, seine 4 Yesodes gewen mechuber, but as long as she was alive, or anyone is alive, the 4 elements are together. Is when starb, but upon physical passing, demolt is v'yave Avram, the neshama, so then Avram, which represents the neshama, comes to the body, lispaid l'Sarah v'liv kaisa, to eulogize Sarah and cry for her. The neshama weint. The neshama is crying over the body. Weil euch noch in Toit und lacher Stalkus is the neshama verbunden mit dem Guf, because even after passing, the soul is still connected to the body, and it grieves the loss of the body. Light them. So, and there's a lot more to be said about this. A lot of what we know about mourning in Jewish ritual has to do with this story and how Avraham represents the soul, grieving the loss of Sarah, who represents the body. But that's not what we're going to focus on here. Like them, as Sarah is a remez auf dem Guf und Avraham auf der Neshama. Is in flugend verstandig was steht. According to this paradigm, that Abraham is soul, Sarah is body, we can now no longer easily understand what it means when it says, not this parsha, not even last parsha, I think it was Parshas Lecha. Kol asher tamer elecha, Sarah, shma b'koila. Anything Hashem tells Avraham, anything that your wife Sarah tells you, listen to her voice. Ois base. I'm going to explain the question. Es ist bewusst der Wort. Okay, but at any rate, how can the soul be told to listen to the body? You would think that that's where all the problems start, is the soul comes down for a mission and it knows intuitively what to do, and the body's the one with all of the temptations and the desires, and it impedes the soul doing its mission. Okay, base. Es ist bewusst der Wort von B'aal Shem Tov auf dem Pasuk Kisira Chamer Seinacha Goimer. It's known, there's a explanation from the B'aal Shem Tov on the Pasuk, when you see the enemy, when you see the donkey of your enemy, when you see the rest of the verses, you see the donkey of your enemy crouching beneath its load, and you may refrain, your first impulse may be to refrain from helping it, but you should surely help it. Kisira chamer. So the B'aal Shem Tov broke it down like this. When you see the chamer is donkey. As du wirst sich eingucken in dein Chomer, Körperlichkeit. When you look at your Chomer means physicality. You look at your own physicality. So chamer is donkey, but it's also Chomer, physicality. You look at your own physicality. Was du zen as seinacha, you see it as your enemy, not your enemy's donkey, but rather you see your corporeality as your enemy. As dein Soina, he's your enemy. Why? Why would you even think that? Weil in Anheb Aveda und beim Anheb von Leben seinen Guf und Neshama seinem einem dem Zweiten. Because at the beginning of your service of Hashem, at the beginning of your life, indeed, soul and body are antagonists to each other. They have different agendas and they are at odds with each other. And so what happens? He's crouching beneath his load. He's being crushed by his load. What is the masa? What is the load? Meint der oil von Torah und mitzvos. It means the yoke, the obligations of Torah and mitzvos. So a person assesses that his body is being overwhelmed, overburdened by the obligations of Jewish law. Nicht guckendig as das is masa, sein masa. Setting aside for a second that this is its burden, meaning it's not a random burden, this is its burden to carry. Was derfar hat men gegeben mitzvos zu neshamas in gufim davka, which is specifically why mitzvahs were given to souls and bodies. Meaning it's not random that the body has these tasks to perform. It's because this is the only way the soul can do it, is in the body. Weil die kavone is to live ois leiten in dem guf, because the point is to refine the body. Von deswegen is das for Emma massa, but nevertheless, let's set aside the fact that we all know that it's for a purpose, it's by design, but nevertheless, let's be real about it. The body feels that it's a burden to have to carry out all these obligations. Was will das nicht, and it doesn't want to do it. Memela is roivus tachas Messiah. That's why we describe it as crouching under its load. Okay, Gimel. So you're following this? We have a question. We know that Avraham is the neshama and Sarah is the body, and yet which is fine. But then we have this. We're trying to reconcile it with this statement where Hashem tells Avraham, "Listen to anything Sarah tells you," which would mean that the soul should listen to the body. So we're going to try to answer that, which doesn't seem normal to us. The soul should listen to the body should listen to the soul. Okay, so we're beginning to answer that by saying a fundamental concept that the B'aal Shem Tov taught regarding the body, that the soul will see the body as an enemy. You should not see it as an enemy. Gimel. Außerdem, was die Mitzvos seinen gegeben geworden darf, Gott in Neshamas in Gufim, seinen die Mitzvos Gufa euch angetan darf in gashmistige Sachen. Now, another concept. In addition to the fact that the mitzvahs were specifically given to souls and bodies, there's another concept, which is the mitzvahs require, for the most part, physical things. And that doesn't just mean physical action mitzvahs. Well, what else? What other kind of mitzvahs you have? Nor euch the mitzvahs welche sein in Chayvus Halavavos, but you thought Chayvus Halavavos was only the name of a sefer. Duties of the heart. Even mitzvahs which are emotional obligations, which you would say, okay, I understand something like putting on tefillin. You need physical tefillin. It's a physical object. And giving tzedakah is a physical thing. But Chayvus Halavavos, emotional obligations, how is that physical? He explains. For instance, love of Hashem and awe of Hashem. And then also you have Chayvus Hamayach, intellectual obligations, as the mitzvah von Hamonas HaYichud, like believing in Hashem's oneness, and he says in Yiddish the same thing. Euch die mitzvahs is inyan, as sollen der füllt werden, dafke in dem körperlichen Fleisch und Herz und Mayach. Even those mitzvahs, the mitzvah is that you should feel them in the physical flesh of the heart and the brain. So, mitzvahs are not only given to souls in bodies, but mitzvahs also inherently entail making use of physical objects. And even those mitzvahs that don't use physical objects, even those because they're intellectual or emotional obligations, nevertheless, they're supposed to be felt in the physical body parts, namely the mind and the heart, the brain and the heart. And then he's going to give some illustrations of what that means, and we have some cool stories. There's a lot of stories this week in this week's Sichos. Okay, Lamashal, an example. The mitzvah von Avos Hashem. A mitzvah from the love of God. Azoivi in Gashmis is doch shmua tevet hidash notzim. Now, we know there's a physical concept, and it's alluded to in the verse in Mishli Tesvav Lamed. That's Proverbs 15:30. And many people probably know these words because it's actually, you know how you say at the end of Shemini Esrei, you say a verse that has the first and last letters of your name. So many people also do the verse that has the first and last letters of the Rebbe's name, or names, because the Rebbe has two names. So the pasuk for Menachem, starts with a mem, ends with a mem. So the illumination of the eyes gladdens the heart. That means clarity in Torah. Shmuel Tova, good news, fattens the bones. And there's a whole story about it in Gittin, story about Rabbi Yechim ben Zakkai, when the Roman emperor, who became an emperor at that moment. At any rate, the point is that a gute besura macht fett dem Bein. Good news makes the bones fat. Wie die Gemara erzählt. And that's the story in Gittin und Vav Beis. As von der gute besura was men hat angesagt, is geworden by a körperliche Änderung. From good news, it physically changed him. It's talking about the Roman emperor. As euch in Avos Hashem, so too, similarly, what does it mean to sufficiently love Hashem? As der Kirvas Alekim Litoi, was der Mensch der Herd, darf euch sein kentig in sein Guf, that his feeling of closeness to Hashem should be recognizable in its effect on the physical body. What does that mean? We're going to get to that. We're going to actually give examples. As euch in Yira, also awe. Nicht nur was es darf sein a kivutz in Mayach oder a filu in Herz, and not just there should be a kivutz, a squeezing, a contraction of the brain and the heart when you're feeling awe. Love is expansive, awe is constriction. Nor es darf sein kentig in dem körperlichen Fleisch von Mayach und Herz, as schreckt sich. It should be recognizable in his physical flesh of his brain and his heart that he is afraid. Shouldn't just be abstract. Alt haben uns gewesen die Nesiim. All of these things were shown to us by the Nesiim, by the Rebbes. Und euch in der Sach is voran a Beispiel. So in this concept too, we find an example. As bewusst, story time. As bewusst die Meise, as der alte Rebbe hat amol in Davening, Rosh Hashanah oder Yom Kippur, kommen zu die Werte über kein Pachtiger sich angeheben, keiklen auf der Erde, sagen die Pach, mit der Pach unter den Pach. The Alter Rebbe was davening, Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, had to have been one of those 2 days, because that's when we have these words in davening, where it says, and therefore, we speak to Hashem, we say, therefore, give pachad, your fear, or your dread. And the Alter Rebbe was feeling the pachad so much, he couldn't even finish the word, and he was rolling around on the floor, saying, pach, he couldn't even get the word out. Und für groß pachad hat nicht gekonnt verendigen dem Wort, because of great dread, he couldn't even finish the word. Erst in der Zeit herum hat ausgeführt dem ganzen Wort pachtocho, and it took him a while, and he was finally able to say the whole word. Okay, so that's an illustration of what it means, that it's having a physical effect on you. Noch a Maisa from dem Rebbe, dem Tzemach Tzedek. This is another story, and this is from the Tzemach Tzedek, the Alter Rebbe's grandson. In the ersten Jahren von seinem Messias is einmal gesessen und verbracht mit Chassidim. In the early years of his leadership, he was sitting verbringing with the Chassidim. Man hat gebracht Kavit. Kavit, by the way, is, I think this is a brand name of, I think it's wine, not really, but this here is like really strong stuff. Das was heißt heint, and the Rebbe says today, what they call it is Neinziker. By the way, the Chassidim call it Zexu Neinziker, the Everclear. Okay. You guys came from New Jersey, you didn't bring any Everclear. That's the thing, when you go to New Jersey to bring Everclear, because in New York, I don't know, maybe when I used to know these things, that was the thing. If you're coming from New Jersey, is that still a thing you saw? You don't know, okay. Hat genommen ein Glas und noch ein Glas. So he took one glass and another glass of this really high-powered 180 proof stuff. Und geheißen angessen a dritten Glas. And he said, pour me a third glass. Nachdem hat a vier getan mit dem Hand über dem Stern. Then he passed his hand before his forehead. Und says, auf gar nicht nicker gewesen de Maschke. And there was no trace of the effects of the alcohol. Hat der Tzemach Tzedek später declared, so the Tzemach Tzedek later explained, as hat sich reingetracht in Gdulas Hashem, that he thought about the greatness of God, is of ungefallen a pached, and then he felt fear, dread of Hashem, and why would that matter? Un yain kosher pached mafigai. There's a saying from it says Si Bava Basra Daf Yud Amud Aleph, that a real fright can sober you up. Don't try that for DUIs or anything, because I don't think it'll change your blood alcohol level. But at any rate, maybe for a second, he gets sobered up from a pachad, from a fear. Und der Pachad nimmt ab von dem Körper die Wirkung, was der Wein hat auf ihm. The pachad, the dread, will nullify the effect that the wine has. The Yira hat bei Emma sehr viel gewirkt. What's the point? That this awe had such a physical effect, und das ist so weit kenntlich gewesen, and it was so recognizable, auf dem Körper, even on his physical body, as es hat herabgenommen die Wirkung von der Maschke, that it nullified the effect of the alcohol. Again, don't try that, at home. So we have an example of the Alter Rebbe davening, and the word pachad literally had him rolling around on the floor. We have an example of the Tzemach Tzedek drinking enormous, copious amounts of high-proof alcohol and sobering up just by thinking about Hashem and the awe affecting him. The point of these stories is that even the mitzvos that are chayves halavaves, chayves hamayach, are physical because they're supposed to have an effect on the body. Okay. Azai is Eichen Ava. Let's get some Ava examples here. I'm going to make a bracha 1 second. Okay, also in Ahava. Azai vi Rav Tzadik Reb Menachem Nochum Chernobyler is given Fet Begufei von Zogen Amen Yehei Shmei Rabba. Okay, remember we said before that Shmua Teva, that are good news, good tidings, Tidash and some fat in the bones. So it says that Nochem Chernobyl, who was one of the early tzaddikim, Talmidei B'aal Shem Tov, Talmidei Magid, that he became fat from saying Amen Yehi Shmei Rabbo. I got fat from saying Berei Minim Ezenes, by the way. Als hat sich reingetracht in dem Shmei Rabbo und Gdulas Havaya, he thought about the greatness of the Shmei Rabbo, the great name, and the greatness of Hashem, as that Eibishter is mevorech la'olam u'ulmei elamaya, that, when we say, I just finished saying Kaddish last week for my father, so I said that probably thousands of times, Shmei Rabbo mevorech la'olam u'ulmei elamaya. La'olam u'ulmei elamaya means, forever and ever, but also literally la'olam means to the world, la'olam. So la'olam u'ulmei elamaya is to the world, to the world, to the world, which is actually describing, as es wird nimshach in alle elamais, that Hashem's great name is getting drawn down through all the worlds. Was oich elam asiyah hagashmi is in klal, including even the physical plane of elam asiyah. In other words, from Atzilus to Bria Yitzira Asiyah, that's la'olam u'ulmei elamaya. World, world, world. Okay. Is an Yisrael geworden, and that aroused him so much mit an ava, with a love, und tainug, and pleasure, bis wann it as das hat gepeilt a Fettkeit in sein Körper, and that affected him, that he actually became physically fat from that. Okay. So the point we're making is the mitzvahs, first of all, they're assigned to souls in bodies. Second of all, even the mitzvahs, which are primarily emotional or intellectual, inherently make use of physicality. Okay, so we're trying to explain here the role of physicality in Yiddishkeit. Daled. V'chadalte ma'azev lei, and you may hesitate, refrain. Your impulse may be to refrain from helping him. Remember, the literal case is you see your enemy's donkey. I'm not helping that guy. But here we're saying chamor is not donkey, it's chaymer, physicality, and enemy means you think of your own physicality, your own body, as your enemy, as an impediment to your spiritual growth. And so you say, oh, it's being crushed under the weight of Torah mitzvahs. Good, let it get crushed. I hope it has a collapse. That's what you're thinking, because you don't know what the B'aal Shem Tov taught. Okay, is der B'aal Shem Tov weiter bewahr in sein Torah auf dem oibenden Mountain Posik, kannst du doch meinen, als wie bald der Guf ist, revetz taches Masoi, wirst du sich vernehmen mit der Aveda, was gehört zu der Neshama. So you might think, oh goody, the body is collapsing, let me go focus on the soul. Und dem Guf wirst du zerbrechen durch Tainesem v'segufim. To the contrary, I'm going to break down the body through fasting, through mortification of the flesh, whip myself, roll in the snow, all that fun stuff, put pebbles in my shoes. People used to do this. Zokman, aziv taziv imay. No, you got to help him. Val men darv mevarer sein dem Guf. You got to refine the body. Don't hurt the body. Refine the body. Bring him aboard. Afilo wenn soll mekaven sein. Alle kavonas von der mitzvah und die mitzvah bepeil wird nicht mekayim sein. Interesting thought experiment. If you would have all of the kavonas of the mitzvah, but not actually do the mitzvah. Remember one time I was a bacher, we were in the Catskills, and we went to some camp, and it was a Jewish camp, and it was like a meditation retreat camp, and there were like a lot of spiritual people there. I know what movement they were from, but it's not relevant. It was a specific group. At any rate, so they had "Hello, my name is" tags. I guess maybe it was their first day there. And there was a guy, literally, his "Hello, my name is" tag said Pnimiyot Halev. Like, "Hello, my name is Pnimiyot Halev," which means like the innerness of the heart. So me and my buddy get out of the car. We see this guy, "Hello, Pnimiyot Halev." That's what he wanted to be called, So, so my friend says to him, "Did you put on tefillin today?" It was Friday afternoon, and we were going from camp to camp, putting on tefillin with people. So normally we go to like the Russian bungalow colony and put on tefillin with the old Russian guys playing chess. That was easy. That was like, but this proved to be a little more challenging. "Hello, Pnimiyot Halev, did you put on tefillin today?" He looks at us with all seriousness. He says, "In my heart." I should have known. It says Pnimiyot Halev. And then my friend argued with him. I don't think he put on film. Okay, not in front of us at least. At any rate, so the Rebbe says you could have all of the kavanas of the mitzvah and then not do the actual mitzvah. Evet mekavan zayin the kavanas from tefillin. Let's say he has the kavanas of tefillin. He thinks about all the things you're supposed to think about. No, but poil vet that can't tefillin nit legen, but he didn't put on tefillin in actuality. Is nit nor was es felt der kiyum von der mitzvah. Not only is he lacking the mitzvah, der hat noch overgeven an avera. He actually did a sin. Hat mevater geven the mitzvah von tefillin. He nullified the commandment of tefillin. And he did all the kavanas. He thought all of the beautiful things he was supposed to think, but he didn't physically do it. Not only he didn't do a mitzvah, he did a sin. God forbid. In contradistinction. But let's say he actually physically puts on tefillin. Und die kavanas hat nicht mekaven geven, but he didn't think the kavanas. Why didn't he think the kavanas? Either maybe he doesn't know the kavanas, or maybe he does know the kavanas, but he, for whatever reason, he didn't think the kavanas. It's an interesting expression. He's going to get punished for that. Meaning a guy who knows the kavanas and he just chooses not to think, he's going to get punished. Because he's supposed to be mekaven. He's supposed to have the kavanas if he knows them. But the mitzvah, but he did the mitzvah. You cannot say he didn't do the mitzvah. So the guy who did the kavanas or thought the kavanas, but he didn't do the action, is nothing. The guy who did the action, he didn't think the kavanas, it's something. It's something. Okay, he should have thought the kavanas also, but I say sometimes it's like you go to a restaurant and you have the waiter who's like great with like the charisma and the people skills and learns everybody's names, is making jokes, and they get your order all wrong. It's like, dude, I didn't come here to schmooze. Like, I didn't come here to make new friends. Get my order right? Or then you have the opposite waiter, no personality, doesn't even smile, nothing, no eye contact, but gets your order right. That's 20% tip, no question. Now, the guy schmoozes and knows everyone's names and makes the jokes and plus gets the order right, 25%. Okay, 30% tip. Okay. All right. So but the point is, there's service and there's service with a smile. Beautiful. But don't do smile with no service. Smile with no service. Oh, he thought the kavanas, but he didn't put on tefillin. Shkoyach. That doesn't really help. Put on the tefillin. Obviously, it's better to do it with the kavanas, service with a smile, but if you have to choose one, service or smile, please, let's start with service, and maybe later you could add the smile. Okay. By einem von dem Tzemach, story time again. Bei einem von dem Tzemach Tzedek's Einiklach hat gedarft seine Bris. One of the Tzemach Tzedek's grandchildren needed to have a bris. Und seinen dort gewen zwei Moilen. And there were two moils that they could have used. Einer's gewen, and here are the choices. Einer's gewen, ältere, was hat gewusst kisve Arizal. There was one who was an older moil, and he knew the writings of the Arizal, Kabbalah. Zi alle, zi nit alle, whether he knew all of Kisve Arizal or not all of Kisve Arizal. But the point is, the parts of Kisve Arizal have to do with Bris Milah. He knew, so he had Kabbalistic knowledge. And then the other choice, un einer is given an ingere. There was a younger one, a mumcha. He was more of a technical guy. Aber sach posheter, but he was more simple wie der ältere than the older one. So you had the older one who's more like a sage and a Kabbalist, and the younger one who's more of a technician. Hat der Tzemach Tzedek gesagt, als man soll nehmen dem ingeren. Tzemach Tzedek said, he instructed, take the younger moil. Und gesagt dem Tam, and he actually gave the reason why. Weil man darf poshet and gashmis abschneiden, because you have to make a cut in actual physicality. So when it comes to making a physical cut, you take the person who has the physical advantage. This guy might have more kavanas. It's not really relevant here. It's nice, but obviously if you can have both, you take both. But if you have to choose one or the other, you take the physical. Okay. Und das ist der Pshat von Kol Asher. Now we're going back to the answer to our question. Das ist Pshat von Kol Asher Temer Lecha Sarah Shma B'Koila. Everything Sarah tells you, listen to her, right? We said before it was a little bit funny because Avraham is the neshama and Sarah is the guf. What? The neshama should listen to the guf? Okay. Vasara meint men, lepirish hazayir dem guf, like the Zayir says, Sara is the body. Well, the ikar kavana is the guf, because guess what? The main point of everything is the body. Jetzt is das behelem. Currently, meaning before Mashiach comes, that is in a concealed state. The primary role of the physical body is concealed. We don't see it. In the future, after Mashiach, it's going to become revealed. Bizvanet as die neshama vet nemen chayus von dem guf, to the extent that, like it says in Ranat, that Rebbe Rashab says, that the soul is actually going to receive sustenance from the body. Like right now, the body receives its life. It's enlivened by the soul. But when the body reaches full refinement, this is when Tchias HaMesim takes place, where souls that were going higher and higher and higher in heaven for thousands of years are going to make a U-turn, because the physical body will be so refined that the only way to have another aliyah and go to a higher level will be, ironically, paradoxically, to come back down into embodiment. That will be the highest level. And that's sort of, the Rebbe doesn't get into it here, but it's explained in many places. Chassidus, the ultimate infinity of Hashem is in the physical world. It's where the finite is infinite, where the limits are unlimited. Like Makam Ha'arin Einam Min Hamida, that the place of the Holy Ark is a place on one hand, but it's above place. So the ultimate infinity is not infinity in the infinite, but it's actually infinity in the finite, if you can wrap your head around that concept. So ultimately, when Mashiach comes, that's why the Hashem desires a home in the physical realm, in the lowest realm, and the physical body will be so refined, the souls will come back to the bodies. Okay, so that's all going to be when Mashiach comes very soon. Now, so what is? But hold on a second. This story happened thousands of years ago, way before Mashiach. So if you tell me the story happened after Mashiach, maybe I get it. No. But listen, by the Ovis is Doch Yedua. By the Ovis, the patriarchs and the matriarchs, it's known as Hitimon HaKadosh Baruch Be'elam Hazeh Me'ein Elam Haba. It's a Gemara, actually. It's a Gemara Bava Basra. The very end, it's actually the last line on the page. No, I'm not a Bucky B'Shas. I looked it up last night. It's actually the last line on the page. I can do the pin test if I looked it up last night, which I did. That Hashem gave the patriarchs and matriarchs a foretaste of Mashiach before it happens. Der Rebishter hat, says in Yiddish now, der Rebishter hat sie gegeben zu versuchen, me'in lam haba, schon auf der Welt. Even in this world, Hashem gave them a little pre-taste. Derfar hat men Avraham gesagt, kol asher temelech Sarah, shma b'koila. That's why Hashem told him, anything Sarah tells you, listen to her, because he was already, at least on one level, living in Messianic times where the supremacy of the body will be revealed. That's the end of the Sicha. And like I said, this is from Chayei Sarah Tafshin Yud Aleph, from the first year before the Rebbe officially, it was Mekabel Nasias, before the Rebbe officially accepted leadership. But it's a foundational concept. Like I said, it's a foundational concept of Torah B'aal Shem Tov. B'aal Shem Tov came and revolutionized this idea. People thought that spirituality was asceticism, fighting the body, renouncing physicality. The B'aal Shem Tov came and said, we're doing away with that. We're going to incorporate the body, no pun intended, incorporate the corporeality, and that this is a foretaste of Mashiach. I mean, the Rebbe doesn't say it explicitly here, but the idea of Torah B'aal Shem Tov is Torah Shel Mashiach, that when Mashiach comes, we'll see the refinement of the physical world. So a lot of what Chassidus comes to teach us is the refinement of the physical body. And a lot of stuff people are talking about today, by the way, that is supposedly so cutting edge or so radical, the body keeps the score and all about the body, and it's not just the abstract, the emotions, it's about the physical body. Yeah, no kidding. This is the B'aal Shem Tov said this, and the Rebbe repeated this, and it's so important to respect the body, to cherish the body, to understand the body is not an enemy in our spiritual growth. To the contrary, the whole point of spirituality is the body. Okay? And I could verbring about this for much longer, but we have a long way still to go. Okay. I'm going to take a 5-second break to clear my head, and we're going to start the next Sicha. All right, we're back. Hey, der erste Shidduch und Chasne, was is beschrieben befeirish in der Torah, is in Heintige Sedra. The first wedding and engagement, dating, however you want to pronounce, translate Shidduch, courtship in Torah is in this week's Parshas Chayei Sarah. The Chasne von Yitzchak's wedding. Wegen Odmen have steht euch in Medrash, als Chasne is merumes in der Torah, aber das ist mir nicht wie Remes und Blaze in etliche Werte. It says that Adam and Eve were married, and the Medrash explains that, but it's only in a few words in Teresh B'Ksav, and it's really in hinted format. It's not explicit. But here we have an explicit and long story about courtship and marriage. Wenn Eliezer hat erzählt, wie Avraham hat geschickt, kein Aram Narayim, wie ist hingekommen, hat gesagt. When Eliezer told them, the people there, how he was sent there, he was sent on a shlichus from Avraham, and how he came there, he said the following, I came today. As Heint is gekommen, I arrived today. Teicht Rashi, so Rashi explains, what does it mean I arrived today? Yeah, no kidding, we just saw you pull up. No. Rashi explains, I left today and I arrived today. Now, if you know anything about geography, you cannot leave, where was he leaving from? Hebron at that time? And go to Aram Naharaim in one day. It's like 2 weeks journey. From here we learn that literally it means that the way leapt before him. Kvitzas Haderech is an interesting concept. There's actually, I've read papers about how physicists explain how it would be, at least in theory. But it's not that you move fast. It's that the road contracts in front of you. There's like a wrinkle in this time-space continuum which contracts the journey. At any rate, that's not the point here. It's a miraculous thing. It's not normal, okay? So Eliezer is telling them, Rivka's family, I experienced this miraculous quick trip. Heint bin ich herausgefahren und heint bin ich angekommen. I left today, I arrived today. Meint das, als hat gehad kvitzas haderech. It means he experienced this thing that is called kvitzas haderech. Okay. Zu lib was hat gedarf sein die kvitzas haderech. Why did he have to have kvitzas haderech? Und zu lib was hat das Eliezer erzählt? And why did he have to tell them? Okay, 2 questions. Why did it happen and why did he tell them? Seinen auf dem voran zwei Asboris. There are 2 explanations. Die zweite is a Chassidische. The second one is a Chassidic explanation. Wenn man dabei sehen, die Hafshata und Nishamedigkeit von Chassidische Asbara. And from that, we're going to see maybe the transcendence and the soulfulness of a Chassidic explanation. By contrast, 2 explanations, and one is the Chassidic explanation. You can sort of, by contrast, see the advantages of the Chassidic explanation. Okay, Vav. So Aleph, the first explanation. B'shas Avraham hat geschickt Eliezer in kein Aram Naharaim hat angeschriebene Starmatonna auf sein ganzen Vermögen zu Yitzchak. When Avraham sent Eliezer to Aram Naharaim, he signed over he signed a contract, a shtar, a document signing over all of his possessions to Yitzchak to help with the shidduch, that when Eliezer would show up and he would show that that the chassan, the prospective groom here, not just the son of a rich man, he himself is rich, these possessions belong to him, so it would help with closing the deal. Was tut man aber mit dem Zman Datum von dem Shtar? But what do you do? How do you date the document? Schreiben a Frediken Zman, das heißt dem Tag, wenn Eliezer is reisgefahren. Now you could write an earlier date, meaning a date that would be earlier than his arrival. You could write the date when he left, meaning you could write the contract that day, the day of his leaving, and date it that day, write the date as that day. Was soll etwas weggeben sein, vermegen bemeshech die 17, so here I said 2 weeks, it's 17 Tag. Why, but why should he sign away his possessions for those extra 17 days, was die Nesia darf nehmen, which the trip takes, 2.5 weeks. You understand, if Avram signs over his possessions to Yitzchak on that very day, and hands the contract to Eliezer, what's going to happen is normally, naturally, it takes 17 days to get there. So for 17 days, you know how much, you can do business with that. Why would you make yourself not liquid? He doesn't need it for 17 more days. And for 17 days, basically, all that money is just hanging there, can't be used by anyone. Und befragt Leute dem Psak von der Mishnah as chayav odem liyes chos al nechosav, especially what the Mishnah says, you're supposed to, it's a spiritual thing. It's not stinginess. You're supposed to treasure your possessions because you're supposed to see how powerful it is as a tool to serve Hashem. So you shouldn't take it lightly. So to sign away all your possessions for 17 days needlessly, no, you don't do that. Meile von später an, das heißt von sind Eliezers angekommen in Aram Naraim, muss weggeben dem Farmegen zu lidem Shidduch. It's understood. Yeah, from the time that Eliezer arrives in Aram Naraim, the possessions have to belong to Yitzchak. That we get. Aber nicht mit 17 Tag frère, but why an extra 17 days before his arrival? Why would you do that? Okay, so that's if you would date it the date that he left. Schreiben mit das Mann von 17 Tag später. Now, what's the other option? You could post-date it. Post-dated checks, right? You could write a later date. He could sign the document the day Eliezer leaves and then put the date later, meaning the date of the arrival. Is das doch a shtar me'ucher? There's a name for it. It's called a shtar me'ucher, a head check. Is takya shtar me'ucher is kosher. Now, it's technically permissible to do such a thing. Aber fortnit is a glatik, but it's not the smoothest thing. Hat Avram geschrieben dem Zman, datum, wenn hat ungeschrieben dem Star. So Avram just wrote the date of the actual drafting of the document. Und der Far is given kvitzas derech, and that's why there had to be this miraculous shortening of the way. Hayem yitzasi v'hayem basi, kedei der Farmegen soll nit a reus von sein Schuss far der Zeit, so that he shouldn't lose control of his possessions needlessly for extra time. Shas Eliezer gekommen kein Aram Naraim. So when Eliezer arrived there in Aram Naraim, Hotter meide gehat. He was afraid. As Besul and Lovin, Rivka's father Besul, her brother Lovin, they were both characters. Velen em fragen, they're going to ask him, wie kommt das, was der Mann von dem Star ist von Heint? How is it possible that the date of the document is today? You came from 17 days journey away. How is the document dated today? Es ist doch a shtar me'ucher, welches bei Avram mechzik shikra. That's a post-dated document. And like we said, technically you could get away with it, but for someone on Avram's level, that seems like falsehood. You're saying something that's not 100% true. Hat Eliezer bald verchapt und gesagt. So Eliezer preempted that whole thing, and he told them straight up, don't ask me any questions. You want to know why? I left today, I arrived today. That's how I have in my hand a document that's dated today, even though I came from 17 days away, because it took me one day. We signed the document today, I left today, and I arrived today. That's why. Okay. That was the first explanation. I don't know how you would describe that type of explanation, but apparently, according to the Rebbe, it's not the Chassidic explanation. Okay. But the second one is the Chassidic explanation. Okay. Es steht as Rivka bei Besulen in Stub is gewähnt Kisheshana bein Achoichem. Ja Reus zwischen Derner. It says that, this is from the Medrash Shir Hashem Rabbah, that Rivka, in her home by Besul was a gangster. He was a bad guy, very, very bad guy. She was like a rose among the thorns. What does that mean? She was the one redeeming righteous person surrounded by a bunch of lowlives. That's true, but the metaphor is a lot more precise than that. Dafka dort wächst die Shoshana. There, among the thorns, is where the rose grows, not by accident. Und die Derner gehören zu ihr, aufhalten und wuchs. And the thorns actually protect the rose's growth. That's what the thorns are there naturally for, to protect the rose. Now, Besul and Lovin were not good people. They were the opposite of good people. So it's not like they were intentionally or for the right reasons trying to protect her. But the reality is, I mean, they were crazy, but they were protecting. Ultimately, the most protection she needed was from them. But the point is, the thorns around the rose were sort of like keeping anyone else from messing with her as well. Und man darf haben a Taina und a Koyach of a Reus nehmen die Shoshana von dort. You have to have a valid argument to extract the rose from there. Warum die Derner losen it? Because the thorns won't let. In dem Schuss von der Shoshana bewassert, why won't they let? In dem Schuss von der Shoshana bewassert man dem ganzen Platz. Because of the rose, the whole area gets watered. You understand spiritually what this means? Because of Rivka, because of her spiritual power, there was incredible spiritual flow of energy to that place, which obviously Lovin and Besul were not into the spirituality of it. They were into cashing it into material prosperity, as all wicked people are. But the point is, they knew she was the goose that lays the golden egg. They had their, it was self-serving, but they were protecting her. They wanted to keep her there. So the thorns also live because of the water that the rose gets. B'shas Rivka is geworden alt 3 Jahre mit der Tag, bis damals ist sie royale Bia, Chasna zu haben mit Yitzchak, hat sich das gleich der Herd bei Avraham. Okay. Technically, legally, 3 years old is the earliest age that a girl can be married. Now, we have to explain what that even means, because we know that they did not consummate their marriage for another 10 years. But what we're talking about is entering into the legal status of being a married woman. That halachically happens at 3 years old. For whatever reason, please don't ask me too many questions, Avraham sensed when Rivka was 3, there's a wife for Yitzchak. For whatever reason, before she was 3, that didn't show up on his radar. He probably knew she existed. She was a relative. He probably got the WhatsApp for the Kiddush, but when she was 3, something shifted, meaning Torah dictates the reality and the truth. When she became 3, then he knew that she is a possible wife. But he didn't know that before that. He only knew that at that point. There's another dimension to this story as well that Rebbe doesn't mention here, but in Medrashim it says that actually there was another reason for the emergency, which was that she was in danger of being abused by Besul when she turned 3. But the point is, none of this really got activated from again, I don't know how these spiritual things work, so don't ask me too many questions, but spiritually, the clock didn't start ticking until she turned 3. Die dosige Änderung ist euch der Koyach und die Teine auf zu verbinden sich mit Kedusha und rauszugehen von zwischen die Derne. That argument, the argument that she's marriageable, was the necessary argument for extracting her from the thorns. In other words, it's not about Lovin and Besul. They're irrelevant. The point is, there's a whole debate going on in heaven, and you have to justify removing Rivka from these klippas who are siphoning off of her. So the argument is, the argument that defeats the klippa is, she's marriageable now, we're bringing her into marriage. Hat Avram gleich gesagt zu Eliezer. So immediately when Avram became aware of that status shift, he said to Eliezer immediately, El arzi vel maladati telech, go to my land, the place where I was born. Lekachto isha livni liyitzchak, go get a wife for my son, for Yitzchak. When es volt nit gewen kein kvitzes derech. Now, if there wouldn't have been the miraculous shortening of the way, volt Rivka gewen by Lavan und Basul iberke Zeit. Rivka would have remained with Lavan and Basul for extra time. And it was not a safe place. It was like I said, they were very dangerous people. So Avram didn't know, it wasn't activated by him, this whole idea of her popping up on his radar until she turned 3. Okay, go get her. But then she's going to be 3 and 17 days. What do you say, 17 days? Those 17 days are precious. Why should she sit in this terrible place for an extra? It was bad enough she had to be there for 3 years. But now she should sit for an extra 17 days? Der Fahr hat man nicht gekonnt anheuben dem Reisgehen von zwischen die Derne durch Schicken Eliezerin. Eder Rivka ist alt geworden 3 Jahre mit der Tag. He couldn't begin the process until she was 3. Und der Ribber ist der noch gewinnt kvitzes derech, and that's why there had to be the miraculous shortening of the way. Kadezi soll dort nicht bleiben kein iberike Zeit, so she shouldn't have to remain there any extra time. B'shas Eliezer is gekommen, kein aram narayim hat verstanden. Now when Eliezer arrived, he understood. As Lavan and Basul Valentinen as Rivka soll überbleiben auf a Zeit bei sie, also wie sie haben Tage geteinet, Teshuva Nairo, Tono Yom Oser. Eliezer knew that Lavan and Basul were going to argue, let her stay a little bit longer, which in actuality, they did say that. Let her stay a little bit longer. So that's why he said immediately, he wanted to preempt that. Hayei, today is all this, and you should know. As das is was handelt sich in Minuten. I love that expression. This is an issue that comes to minutes. Don't tell me she's going to stay for a year. We're dealing with precious minutes. Jede minute is a shad. Every minute she stays here is a pity. And the greatest proof, Eliezer says, is look, Hashem did a miracle for me. There's this axiom that Hashem doesn't do gratuitous miracles. If Hashem does a miracle, it's for a reason. So the fact that Hashem did a miracle for me is a proof that this is something that cannot wait. She has to leave now. Okay. Zion. The offene Anweisung. Now we're going to make it practical. The open direction or teaching from dem Torah Sipur, from this Torah story, for uns, for us, und weitere Deures, and for future generations is. What should we learn from this? Interesting story, but what are we supposed to take away? There's a concept that the deeds of the fathers are an indication for the children. This is from the Ramban. And it's an idea that things that happen in the lives of the patriarchs and matriarchs create templates that are then replicated in a sort of like a pattern. So when you learn about the Aves, things that happen to them, you learn about what is happening to us. Azoi wie bei Rivka is given kvitsa derech kedei sie soll nicht verbleiben in iberike minut in Besul's Haus. Just like by Rivka, there was a miraculous shortening of the journey for Eliezer in order that she shouldn't remain 1 extra minute in Besul's house. Azoi is das eicha simin labanim. That is also something that exists in our case. What is that? Men darf nicht herabfallen bei sich von dem Cheshach von Galus. You shouldn't be despondent about the darkness of Galus. Worum der Eibishter wird zu eilen die Geula, as men soll nicht darfen bleiben kein iberike minut in Galus, because Hashem is going to hasten the redemption that you shouldn't remain 1 extra minute in Galus. Also wie Mitzrayim is der Scheirisch von alle Galusen. Is Punkt wie in Galus Mitzrayim is given by Etzamayim Yatzavagim. So Mitzrayim is the paradigm or the archetype of every exile. And with Mitzrayim, it says when they left, it was Be'etzamayim, on that very day. Meaning on that very day that, the basically the buzzer beater. You guys watch basketball? The buzzer beater. Okay. Und wie sagt in Mechilta, als der Eibishter hat sie nicht aufgehalten, a filo kein Augenblick. Like the Mechilta, the Medrash says, Hashem did not hold them back even for one blink of an eye, however short that amount of time is. It wasn't even one blink of an eye extra longer. So too, Hashem promises us that in the coming redemption, just as in the Exodus from Egypt, I will show you wonders when Mashiach comes, and in a similar way. In Itztikin Golus, in our current exile, men darf nur maschlam sein die Pachen Ktanim und der noch wird sein bimheira yomeno die Geula Shlema durch Mashiach Tzedkenu. We just have to finish up the little jars. It's a reference to Yankov Avinu. But the little details, and then boom, we go out without any extra delay. Okay, and that's a Sicha from Parshas Chayei Sarah, Tafshin Yud Gimel. Okay. We're going to take a 5-second break. We're going to start the next Sicha. We've done 2 Sichas so far. What was the first one about? I'm very impressed the ladies didn't say it was about listening to your wife. Very good. Yes, body and soul. Yeah, the supremacy of the body. Listen to your body. Cherish your body. Incorporate the body to your service of Hashem. Second Sicha was about what? Yeah, the how quickly redemption will come, even if... Why does Hashem like suspense? You know why? It's because we always get ready for Shabbos, no matter how late it is. You know, nowadays the candle lighting is like at 4 or whatever, but in the summer, and the candle lighting is like 8 o'clock, and still it's like, does someone turn on the cholet? Does someone turn on the cholet? I don't know. It's 8 p.m., but always last minute. So I think Hashem is Jewish, clearly. He's waiting till the last second. Okay. Okay, page 36. Eis Auf der Parsha, wo Avraham sagen die Rezal. Die Office Sichos shel Avdei Batei Ovis mit Terosen shel Banim. It says about the Parsha, Avraham Zokin, that more precious is einem better, die Rede von die Knecht von die Oves, wie die Teure von die Kinder. The speech, the talk, the conversation of the slaves of the patriarchs is more precious than the Torah of the children. What does that mean? That means, we're about to explain, but I'll just say it before I read the Yiddish. Eliezer's story is told twice. When it happens, and then when he retells it. A lot of words. So you have a story that's told by a servant of one of the patriarchs, and Torah gives it tons of words. Then, in contrast, you have halachas that are actually telling us how to live and function, and those can be conveyed through one word, and you have to unpack it with the methods of the oral tradition to even know what it's talking about. So it's an interesting discrepancy. Okay. Warum kamen Gufei Torah lernt man ab von ein übrigen Eis und so weiter. Many laws of Torah you learn from like an extra letter, like literally an extra letter, not even a word. Das heißt, as Teros and Shalbonim, that means the Torah of the children, is gesagt geworden kurz durch Haramis. It said short and it said through hints. Was das ist der Unterschied von Torah Shebechsav und Torah Sheba'al Peh. That's the fundamental difference between the written and the oral Torah. Was Torah Sheba'al Peh is barichus and mit Einzelheiten, und Torah Shebechsav is kurz und mit Ramazen. The oral law is at length and detailed, and the written Torah is short and includes hints. Aber Sichos shel Avdei Ovis steht barichus und oisfirlich. And yet, in contrast, the story of Eliezer is told at length. Noch mehr. Einen steht 2-3 Mal, also wie die Meise von Eliezer. So Eliezer's story not only is it told at length, even if it would be told just one time, the one time it's told very lengthy with lots of details. But it's told with lots of details twice. Steht früher, was Avraham hat gesagt und was mit dem hat passiert. Und dennoch steht das als noch einmal. First it says it when it happened, then it says it when Eliezer erzählt, was Avraham hat gesagt und was es hat mit dem passiert. Then he conveys it, tells them what happened. Tess. Chodsch der Tam of dem ist, weil Likkutei Sichos und Shalabdi Oveis, aber bei welcher Indien wird das erzählt in Torah? So the Rebbe says like this. It's interesting. Yeah, there's a general concept that this reflects on the preciousness of the speech of the servants of the patriarchs. But let's get real specific, because what's the primary example of this principle? It's in the context of a wedding, of a marriage. And that is significant. In the Indian von a shidduch, and a chasna, we're talking about a shidduch, we're talking about a wedding. Von dem ist verstandig, als äußert der Meile von Sichos und Shalabdi Ovis, is der Meile euch der Indian von chasna. So the Rebbe logically concludes, not only do we learn from this the preciousness of the speech of the servants of the patriarchs, we also learn from this the importance of a wedding. But where do we see this uncharacteristic lack of economy of language in the Torah, where the Torah is giving so many words to talk about something? We see it specifically in relation to a wedding, and that conveys to us the absolute importance of marriage. Die Erklärung davon ist, als Yid geht bei einer jüdischen Haus, ist das ein Binyan Adayad auf ewig, weil baut es al pi Torah. A Jew goes to build a Jewish home, meaning to start a family, and that's a Binyan Adayad, an eternal edifice, because he's doing it according to Torah. Was ist Torah's Chayim, welche ist gegeben geworden von dem, welche lebt ewig. Torah is a ever-living Torah, given by an ever-living God. Which causes that those who follow it are also ever-living. Und der Haus, was beut wird, euch bin Nitzchi, was nur dann heißt das Chaim Bemis. And then the house is an eternal house, which, by the way, according to Torah, only something that is eternal is called truly alive. Okay. Der Vater steht, as das, was Eliezer hat gegeben Rivka an Nezimzov, Becca Mishkale. Okay, now let's break down the story. We're talking about building a house on the foundations of Torah. So Eliezer gave Rivka, he gave her some gifts. One of the gifts is Nezimzov, Becca Mishkale, a nose ring which weighs a Becca. Und Shnei Tzemidim, Asara Zahav Mishkalam, he gave her two, bracelets, that they weigh 10 shkalim. Is das given for kiddushin? It was the betrothal. The betrothal, you have to give something of value. Und es ist given antkegen dem machitz hashakel bekel golgelis. The symbolism was that the nose ring, which weighs a beka, which is a half shekel, is representative of the half shekel bekel golgelis that was collected in the wilderness. Was das is the mitzvah von Tzedakah, which also in turn represents the mitzvah of charity. Welche wird angerufen klolos mitzvahs, and Tzedakah is called the general mitzvah, the ultimate. By the way, not going to get into a whole lengthy explanation of this, but explains in Tanya that Tzedakah is called ha-mitzvah, the mitzvah, meaning the mitzvah par excellence, the quintessential mitzvah, because the whole purpose of mitzvahs is to refine physicality, and there's no mitzvah that packs more of a wallop when it comes to transforming physicality than tzedakah, because you had to put in physical energy to earn it. And then when you have it, you could have procured your own physical needs, and then you give it to someone else to procure their physical needs. So it's very, very physical. I'm mentioning that because it's connected to the first Sicha that we learned, the importance of physicality. At any rate, so tzedakah is considered the ultimate mitzvah, the quintessential mitzvah, and that is what's represented by the Bekel Goylis, and that is what's represented in turn by the Nazim Zav Beka Mishkale. So he gave her one gift which represents the mitzvahs. Und ankegen die zwei Luches mit asceticism, and then the two bracelets which weigh 10 shkolim represents the 2 tablets with the 10 commandments. Was das is the klal Torah, which represents Torah. So one gift represents mitzvos, one gift represents Torah. And Jews received upon themselves at the time of the revelation at Sinai, they received upon themselves the Torah with Kabbalat Ol, with acceptance of the yoke of heaven. Zogen dignase far nishma, they said, we will do before we will understand. Warum der Yesoid von Bayana Yiddische Stub is Torah mitzvos mit Kabbalat Ol, because the foundation of building a Jewish home is Torah mitzvos, accepted with an acceptance of the yoke of heaven, with discipline, with devotion. Okay. Yud, der Tam was hat gegeben zwei Tzmidim. Why did he give 2 bracelets? And kegen die zwei luches, which represent the 2 tablets. I know Mel Brooks says there were 3 tablets. Of welche die asceticism seinen gewähnt dafke chorus ausgekritzt nicht angeschrieben ist. And on the tablets, the 10 Commandments were not written, they were carved, they were engraved. What's the reason? Written Torah in general is ink on parchment, like I say for Torah. Das heißt, als der Tint, die Oisius, ist eine besondere Sache und die Parchment ist eine besondere Sache und von die 2 Sachen zusammen ist zu neu gestellt Torah Shebechsav. You have one thing, which is the ink. You have the other thing, which is the parchment. And together, you put them together and you have words. Torah Shebechsav. Euch in Torah Shebal Peh, interestingly, in the oral law, is Franz zwei Sachen. You also have 2 different entities. Die Rede von Torah, the speech of Torah, und der Mensch, was lernt die Torah, and the person who learns the Torah. Welch is doch a besondere Sache. Those are 2 different things. So the written Torah, you have 2 different things. You have the ink and the parchment. Oral Torah, you have 2 different things. You have the speech and the person. But in contrast, the 10 Commandments on the 2 tablets, seien die Eisies gewesen, eingekritzt, they were engraved letters, das heißt, die Luche seien nicht kein besondere Sache, von dir nur von sie allein seien gemacht, die Eisies. The letters were not a separate entity from that which the letters were on, rather it was all one thing. It's called minei ube, from it itself. Der Inyan von Eisies Chakika, eingekritzte Eisies, in the Vedas Hashem is, what's the concept of engraved letters in terms of our service of God? Wie die Gemara sagt, the Gemara says, as nachdem wie Zeiche wird es uveseira sei, sein Teire, mit der Teire wären ein Sach. So Gemara in Kiddushin actually asks, I won't get into the whole lengthy explanation, but it asks if a Torah scholar can forego the honor due to him. And the argument that he can, because one argument is he can't, because it's not his honor, it's Kavod Torah. So what right does he have to forego that honor? But the argument that he can forego that honor is from the first chapter of Psalms. So it says, in his Torah, he meditates day and night. So it says, Torah means the person's Torah. It started off as B'teras Hashem Chavtzai. When you just wanted to learn it, it was Hashem's Torah. But after he actually puts in the sweat equity, then it becomes the person's Torah. So that's the argument that he could actually forego the honor due to a Torah scholar. So he and his Torah become one. The way that we learn it, you'll learn Perek of Tanya. It talks about it's like food that you eat and you metabolize it and becomes part of your flesh and blood. The Torah you learn isn't separate from you. It actually becomes part of your wiring. Und der Pfarr hat Eliezer gegeben Tzmidim an kegen de Luches Dafke. That's why Eliezer specifically gave this gift, the bracelets, the 2 bracelets, which represent the 2 tablets of Zuweisen as the Yiddish Stub, because he was making a statement about how you build a Jewish home. That a Jewish home, a Yiddish Stub, welcher darf sein auf die Yesedes von Torah und Mitzvos. A Jewish home has to be built on the foundations of Torah and Mitzvos. Is nicht genug, der Yid soll mekayim sein, die Torah mit Kabbalat Ol. It's not enough that he's doing Torah and Mitzvos with discipline. Aber mit der Torah sein 2 besondere Sachen, and yet he and Torah remain 2 separate entities. Chotsch, they stimmen, even though they fit together. Nor mit der Torah sollen wer ein Sach. No, he and Torah have to become one thing, zu machen von sich allein Torah, to make yourself into Torah. Wird eins mit Anei Hashem Elokecha und sei mit alle Dibros. He becomes, this is such a powerful statement here. He, the person, the individual Jew, or she, becomes one with Anei Hashem Elokecha. That's wild. That's a radical statement. But that's what is required in order to build a Jewish home that's going to be eternal, like the Torah is eternal, like Hashem is eternal, like the Jewish people are eternal. Yod Aleph. In other words, it means that Torah is not an incidental thing to your home. Oh, how is it a Jewish home? Oh, because we have some Yiddishkeit involved. No. Every single aspect of life is permeated with Yiddishkeit to the point where that is the essence of everything, even the so-called mundane things. There's actually no truly secular aspect of the Jewish home. It's all holy. Okay. Continue. Yud Aleph. Und das ist was Yafes Sichos und Shalavdei Aves mit Teros und Shalbonim. This is why we say that the speech of the servants of the patriarchs is more precious even than the Torah of the children. Was mir sehen das durch dem Inyan von Achasana, and we see this in the context of what story? A story of a wedding, particularly Yitzchok and Rivka's wedding. Avdei Aves is der Inyan von Kabbalat Ol. Why does it say the servants of the patriarchs? Because a servant, an avid, is the concept of accepting the yoke. Und Chasna is euch a binyan of the Yisaidis von Torah mitzvos mit Kabbalat Ol. Chasna is also subjugating yourself with Kabbalat Ol. In an eifin von Eisis HaChakika, in the aforementioned manner of engraved letters, where it becomes one with you. Das is a Yisaid of Teiros and Shalbanim, and that's the foundation to Teiros and Shalbanim. So we're putting together the two parts of the Maimar Chazal. The Sichos on Shel Avdei Aves, be an avid with Kabbalat Ol, and then you'll have Teiros and Shalbanim, you'll have a home that follows Torah. B'shas is fran der Inyan von Kabbalat Ol in dem the legend die Yisaidis bariches un oisferlich übergechazet einmal und noch einmal dan kon sein Teiros und Shalbanim. The Rebbe spells it out now. When you have the Kabbalat Ol and when you put down the foundations in a manner of acceptance of the yoke, and it's very clear, it's very detailed. It's not just something you gloss over and you have a 5-minute speech from a chassan teacher before the chuppah, and you repeat it once and you repeat it another time. Then you can have Teiros and Shalbanim, a home that follows Torah. The proti halachas, following the detailed halachas, kurz and mitaremes that are hinted to short and with hints in the Torah. We had this in the first Sicha, in the Sicha in Bereshis. The Zohar says Hashem looked into the Torah to create the world. And the Rebbe actually used the English word back there in the Bereshis Sicha, blueprint, that Hashem used Torah as his blueprint to create the world. Okay. Der Rebbe hat reingeguckt in Torah und beschaffen die Welt. Und so steht euch, bei Nashes Tagabareise mekayim alma. And conversely, the Zohar also says, Hashem looks in the Torah and creates the world. The person looks in the Torah and is mekayim the world. He keeps the world going. The world that Hashem created. As a mensch guckt rein in Torah, steht durch dem die Welt. The world subsists because a person is learning Torah. Die Yisaid von Welt is Torah. The foundation of the world is Torah. Memela is euch bei jeden einem in sein eigene Welt, and so too in the microcosm. So the macrocosm of the world, at large, exists because of Torah. Also in the microcosm, your world, your little world, your home, your family that you are building when you get married, that also exists because of Torah. B'shaser guckt rein in Torah, die Yisaidis von Torah und mitzvos mit Kabbalat Ol, when he looks into the Torah, and he does it with a spirit of acceptance of the yoke. Und in der Eifen von a binyan nitzchi, and he does it in a manner of an eternal edifice. Demot wird beschaffen und steht die Welt. That's how the world, his microcosm, gets built. As die Stub, was erbeut, is an Ebekin. And then the house that he builds is an eternal house. And it will not be forgotten from your children, your children's children, for forever, with a upright generation which will be blessed. Okay, so that was a Sicha from Parsha, not from Parsha, not from a Shabbos, from a Beis Reish Chodesh Kislev Tavshin Yud Gimel. Okay. All right, so the first Sicha was about listen to your wife. Very good. Smart. Okay. the supremacy of the body, the ultimate point of physicality. The body keeps score. Okay, second Sicha was about. No, we already forgot. Yeah, the quickness of Geula, the buzzer beater, right? That Hashem took Rivka out at the last minute, and He will not leave us in Gullus one extra second. Okay, and then the third Sicha, which we just learned. Torah, foundation of the home. To have an eternal home has to be based on Torah. And not just a little bit of Torah sprinkled in, but Kabbalat Ol, you have to accept Torah with a sense of Nasav and Nishma. And of course we learn, we understand, but after the fact, not as a condition to acceptance. Okay. And it also should be carved in, Minei Obey, like carved letters. Okay. Yud Beis. We're doing well over here. Okay. Yud Beis. This is actually the last Sicha, but it's, I think, longer than all the other ones. All right. Somebody asked me about next week, because I said I have to rush to the kinnis. She asked me, well, do you have to learn all the Sichas? I said, I mean, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to show up. But the point of this project, when I started this year with Parshas Bereishis, was I wanted to have a Davar Shalom. I wanted to have a complete project where we had the entirety of Likkutei Sichos Chelik Aleph. First of all, so we could all sort of congratulate each other at the end and make a siyum, which God willing we'll do. But also, in the future, if anyone's learning any of the Sichos from Chelik Aleph, they should be able to look it up, and they shouldn't say, oh, he didn't do that one. That was the one that he didn't do. So we're doing all of them. Okay. Page 38, Ois Yud Beis, chapter 12. In der Heintige Seder steht, als Avraham Avinu hat gesagt zu Eliezerin, Simno Yodcho Tachas Rechi. Okay. In this week's Parsha, Avraham tells Eliezer, his slave, before he sends him on the mission to go find a wife, he says, place your hand under my thigh. When he swears an oath, he makes him swear an oath, and he says, place your hand under my thigh in order to take the oath. The Gemara, lernt up derfon. So the Gemara learns, the Gemara in Shavuos. You know what Shavuos is about? It's about Shavuos. What are Shavuos? Oaths. It's a good place to learn about how to take an oath. So in the Gemara in Shavuos, which talks about oaths, it says that when Eliezer swore an oath, and he placed his hand under Avram's thigh, which, as is going to be explained, means he took hold of his Bris Milah, which sounds very strange to us. The Gemara learned up derfun, as a shvur darf sein dafke in the kitas chayfetz, that when you make an oath, you have to hold a holy object. Zogt Rav Papa, as das meint a Sefer Torah, Rav Papa says, what's a holy object? A Torah scroll. Das heißt, as a beschweren muss man dafke mit a Sefer Torah, und as a dain welche beschwert on a Sefer Torah is a Torah, beschwert on a Sefer Torah, is a Torah bedvar Mishnah und darf chayze sein. And any judge who administers an oath without somebody holding a Torah scroll has erred, and they have to do a redo. Aber die Gemara führt dort euch nicht wie Rav Papa. However, that's what Rav Papa says. The Gemara does not conclude in accordance with Rav Papa. Und der Din bleibt als Chotsch l'chatchila darf man Tage haben a Sefer Torah, aber b'diavad is gut fillen euch. The Gemara concludes, yeah, l'chatchila, in the first case, a Sefer Torah is the preferable choice for the Nikitas Chayfetz, for holding a holy object at the time of taking an oath. But b'diavad, after the fact, second best and also acceptable is tefillin. You could hold tefillin while you swear the oath. That would also be okay. Und a Talmud Chacham and a Torah scholar, mishum kveide, mega fila l'chatchila schwerin mit tefillin und nit dafke mit der Sefer Torah. And with a Torah scholar, is a special dispensation. He can even l'chatchila in the first case swear on tefillin. Der ganze din arum, welche die Gemara redt, is gewen a shvur von meide b'miktas hatayna. Now, the context, if you look there in the Gemara in Shavuos, is talking about someone who takes an oath because he was a meide b'miktas. Seinen da nit verstandig zwei Sachen. We have two questions. Let me explain before we get to the Rebbe's two questions. A meide b'miktas. Meide means I admit. Miktas means partially. Kitzat. A meide b'miktas means someone says to you, You owe me $200. Says, I do not owe you 100. That's called the Moed B'mitzvos. A complete denial is one thing. A partial denial is another thing. And to affirm the statement of one who makes a partial denial, the person who makes that denial is obligated to take an oath. If he doesn't want to take an oath, then he loses the argument. Okay. So 2 questions. Aleph, the Kash was Teisvus fragt dort, wie bald, if you look there in the Gemara in Shavuos, so there's a question Teisvus asks. Wie bald is dem ganzen Inyan lernt man ab von Avraham Avinu, was bei ihm ist doch nicht gewähnt, der Inyan von Moed B'mitzvos. The original context was not a Moed B'mitzvos situation. When Eliezer was swearing, it wasn't because he got himself into a situation where he had to swear in order to clarify a partial admission. That wasn't the context. So Teisvus asks, is far was lernt man das da up of Moed B'mitzvos dafka? So then why does the Gemara learn from that case the law of a Moed B'mitzvos? It's not the original context. Man hat doch das gedarft a reis lernen euch of Shavuos habitui and Shavuos hapikadin. There are other types of Shavuos, like Shavuos habitui. A person makes a statement, he wants to take an oath to swear that what I'm saying is true. Or Shavuos hapikadin, a person was watching an object for somebody and he lost it, and he wants to he say it's not my fault, depending on the type of watchman that he was. At any rate, there are different cases of oaths. Why doesn't the Gemara say that it applies to those cases? Only on Moed B'mitzvos, which wasn't even the case in the original proof text. And Teisvus bleibt by Akasha, and the funny thing is, Teisvus doesn't answer it. Asks the question, it doesn't have an answer. Interesting question. Okay. Base, second question. By Avraham is doch nit gewen, nit kein Sefer Torah, nit kein Tefillin. Avraham didn't have a Sefer Torah, he didn't have Tefillin. Nor an andere mitzvah, he had a different mitzvah. Von wann nimmt man zu sagen, als man darf haben a Sefer Torah oder Tefillin dafke? So then where do they get it that it's specifically a Sefer Torah or Tefillin? In other words, I get it why Avraham used the Bris Milah, that was his only mitzvah. But then from there you learn Sefer Torah and Tefillin, like those 2 specific things. Interesting. Okay. So those are 2 questions. One is, why does the Gemara learn that this is a law about Moed B'mitzvos, a partial admission, when that wasn't even the case in the original? And why does the Gemara learn that the holy object that one holds when one takes an oath is a Sefer Torah or Tefillin, when that wasn't in the original? Okay. Yud Gimel. Der Inyan von Schwur wird erklärt in dem alten Rebens am Maimer. The concept of an oath is explained in the Alter Rebbe's Maimer. Und is fearlicher in dem Tzemach Tzedek's Maimer, and even more at length, in detail, in the Tzemach Tzedek's Maimer. And the footnote here, citation 29, is Kitzurim Tzutanya. The Tzemach Tzedek wrote Kitzurim. He wrote commentaries on Tanya, summaries of Tanya. So you know, Perek Aleph Tanya. So the beginning of Tanya, it says, we learn in the Bris in the end of chapter 3 of Nida, Mashbiyan Oisei, they make him take an oath. The neshama is administering an oath before it comes to the world. Be righteous, don't be wicked. Okay. So the Tzemach Tzedek explains over there. What does it mean, Mashbiyan Oisei? What does that mean? They give him an oath. Mashbiyan is like Shavuot, an oath. So he explains there that as Shavuot is Maloshin Soiveya, Zatkeit. You turn the shin to a sin, but it's related to the word satisfied, satiated. Das heißt, as das gibt man a koyach milmaila. An oath satiates one. What does it mean? An oath empowers one. When you take an oath, it's not just obligating you, it's actually empowering you to carry out the thing that you took the oath for. A higher power than yourself is infused in you when you take the oath. Der Far is der Din as nishboyin lekayim es a mitzvos Men meg schweren auf mekayim sein mitzvahs. That's why you're allowed to take an oath to do a mitzvah, which, why would that need to even be told to us? Because you already swore to do the mitzvahs. Von Bar Sinai and Har Sinai. Why? Because when you take a shvuah on a personal level, you're supplementing it, giving yourself even greater empowerment. That's why you're allowed to do it. Und das is, you're not allowed to swear you're not going to keep Torah. You can't swear against what you already swore at Torah, but you could double up and you could swear to do a mitzvah, even though you're already sworn. Und das ist euch der Inyan von Mashbiyan oisei ti Tzadik val ti Rasha, men beschwert der Menschen, eder wird geboren, du sollst sein a Tzadik und sollst nicht sein kein Rasha. And that's also what it means in the beginning of Tanya, that they give him an oath. It means they empower him. They give him a boost to be a tzaddik and not a rasha. Bichdei as der keich was men git mil meile soll sich verbinden mitten Menschen da unten. Now, in order that power should actually connect down here, because in Chassidus we talk a lot about like spiritual energies can remain aloof. We call it makif. It doesn't really settle in. So it's there, but you have it in your account, but you can't make a withdrawal. So what good is it to you? So in order that it should get absorbed, basically. As soll bakommen dem Dosek in Koyach und soll kennen ausnutzen. That you should get that power in a way that you could use it practically. Darf man haben eine Mutze, welche verbindet den Menschen mit dem Koyach von Lamaila. We need a bridge to connect the person with the power. He's getting the extra infusion of power, but not necessarily is that going to manifest in his actual life. So we need something to help him bring it into physicality. This is interesting, again, the theme of physicality that we have had a couple of times in the Sichas this week. Der Tzedakah Verbund is a mitzvah. The bridge that spans between spiritual and physical is a mitzvah. Why? We said this in the first Sicha, when we were talking about the importance of the body. Vor a mitzvah sein dem ewigsten Shluchim. Azayvia state that we're giving a little bit different signal, different expression here, but it calls the Medrash Tanchuma calls mitzvahs Hashem's emissaries. Azayvia state, kabdu as a mitzvah shehein shluchai. Hashem says, get up, cover the mitzvahs, honor my mitzvahs, val ze seine meine shluchim, they're my shluchim. And what does that mean? One's emissary is as oneself, so the mitzvahs are like Hashem himself. Derfar can a mitzvah rup trogen unverbinden dem Keach von Eben mit dem Menschen. Mitzvahs can bring down and connect that spiritual power to the physical person. Und das ist der Tam für was a Schwur darf sein, darf gemeintiges Chayvetz. That's why when you take an oath, you have to grasp a physical object. Warum durch dem, was halte Chayvetz von a mitzvah? Because when you hold a mitzvah object in sein Hand, in your hand, verbind dem der Tzedakah Chayvetz mit dem Keach von Eben, then you're drawing down in a physical vessel that spiritual power, that extra infusion of empowerment. Yudalid. Das is the declaring of Nikitas Chayvetz Bechlal. Now, that explains in general the spiritual mechanics behind grasping a holy object when you take an oath. But why specifically a Sefer Torah or Tefillin? Why those objects? It says, Hashem did not create anything for naught. It's a Gemara in Shabbos. Der Fahr is umetum wo Yidis darf von jeder Sach machen Kedusha. Anywhere a Jew finds himself, therefore, he must make that place holy, the physical place. Umemela darf ausnutzen die Shvur. And he has to use the shvur, which means the oath, but it also means dem koyach, the extra power, was men gitem von eben, which comes to him from above. In der ganze Welt, and he has to use it in the world. He has to take that power, bring it down into the world. Der Tzedakah verbunden von dem koyach von eben, durch den Menschen, mit der ganze Welt, is durch Torah. The connection, the specific medium of connection that brings that spiritual power through the person into the world is Torah. What Torah is, der Mamutza, Torah is, in this case, the intermediary. If you want a nice long Yiddish word that after Chelik Aleph, they didn't use words like this anymore. They just use Lashon Kodesh. Verbindungskraft. A connecting power. Zwischen dem Eibishten mit Welt, that connects Hashem to the world, leit dem oben dem Mountain Maimer as Estako Baraiso Bora Alma, like it says, Hashem looked into the Torah and he made the world. So the mitzvah is the connector between this spiritual power, this abstract, lofty, spiritual energy, and bringing it into the physical world. Leit dem vet men euch verstehen dem Inyan for was men nemt tefillin zu a shvur. Now we understand, according to this, we will understand why we use tefillin. But tefillin is der Inyan von Torah. Tefillin represents Torah. Also wie es wird declared in dem Maimer Chassidus Dibur Maschel Isa B'Medish Tillim. Like it says in the famous Maimer Isa B'Medish Tillim. Why is that a famous Maimer? Because that's the Bar Mitzvah Maimer. You still remember your Bar Mitzvah Maimer? Isa B'Medish Tillim. What? I'm Rabbi Eliezer. What? Yeah. I'm Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yisrael of Negadish Baruch Rabbi Nishrael Reitzon on the Liga B'Teira Yom V'Layla Avo Ein Lanu. Yeah, very good. You do remember it. Israel. Oh, very good. Keep going. Yes, so it starts off, the Bar Mitzvah Maimer. Rabbi Eliezer says, the Jews say to Hashem, Master of the world, we want to learn Torah day and night, but we don't have time. Well, we don't have time. We're checking our social media. No, we're working. Unfortunately, we have obligations in this world that we have to tend to. We would love to learn Torah every single moment. So Hashem says to the Jewish people, okay, I got a solution for you. Perform the mitzvah of tefillin, which only takes, a short amount of time, relatively, and I will consider it as if you learn Torah day and night. And by the way, it's interesting you have here the official Yiddish from the Mugadika version here. I don't know if that matches the Yiddish version the boys use for the mitzvah. Yidden haben gesagt, fahr dem Ewigsten, mir willen harven in Torah, Tag und Nacht. And we said all this. Okay. I'm going to go to the end of the parentheses. Versteht men doch von dem Maimer Azalas Tefillin is derselbe Inyan von Sefer Torah. So you understand from this that Tefillin is the same thing as Sefer Torah. Because we want to learn Torah day and night, Hashem gives us tefillin as the way to accomplish that, or it's tantamount to accomplishing that. So we see that that tefillin is equivalent to Torah. Der Bira Inyan is, what's the explanation? Warum der Inyan von Torah is mamshech sein moichen in midas. He speaks about this in the Maimer. The concept of Torah is to draw down moichen into midas, to draw down intellect into emotion. Und dasselbe wird euch aufgetan durch Tefillin, and Tefillin does a similar thing. Durchlegen Tefillin lamata, when a person down here puts on Tefillin, poilt men die Hanachas Tefillin lamaile, it causes Hashem, so to speak, puts on Tefillin, like it talks about in the Bar Mitzvah Maimer, that Magidavot of Liankiv Chukul Mishpotov, whatever Hashem tells us to do, really he does, and when we do it, it causes him to do it. V'yashteh Kadosh Baruch Hu nicht Tefillin, as der Eibishter Kaviyachol like Tefillin, Kadosh Baruch Hu Zah Midos, und Tefillin is der Inyan von Meichen. Kadosh Baruch Hu nicht Tefillin meint Hamshacha von Meichen in Midos. So you want to get into the Kabbalistic mechanics, what's talking about here when it says that Kadosh Baruch Hu puts on Tefillin, what it means is Hamshachas Moichen in Midas, that the intellectual energies are brought down to the emotional plane. And that's what Tefillin does. Und derfar kann man euch durchhalten Tefillin beschaß der Schwur, was der Inyan ist, Avedas Hashem, ist Mishabed sein dem Moichen und Hart, ufton dem Verbund mit dem Keich Shalmaila mit Welt, also wie durch Torah. And that's why, if you hold tefillin when you're making an oath, that will help you, will facilitate drawing down, because tefillin is subjugating the mind and heart to Hashem. That is what will accomplish the connection between that lofty spiritual power, that infusion of extra spiritual power, and the physical world. That is done through Torah or through tefillin. Either way, they both accomplish Hamshachas Meichen b'midos. Aber das is blois an inyan von diavad. But to use tefillin to do that is only after the fact. Azoi yes is euch der Laschen von dem der Mountain Medrash, as jeden wollten wellen horven in Torah Tag und Nacht, just like the original case where Rabbi Eliezer says the Jews wanted initially to learn Torah all day and night. Novi Baldes ein lon pnai, but since they didn't have enough time, is b'diavad, so fine. After the fact, so then it's genug. It's also fine. Genug euch. It's also okay. Der Inin von Tefillin, they could use Tefillin instead. Der Shibud von Kop und Herz lekol hapachos von Unheibstag, to at least at the beginning of the day subjugate the mind and heart. Was durch dem bleibt das euch auf a ganzen Tag, and then it remains, the effect remains after for the rest of the day, wie es darf zu sein, in the proper way, the way that it needs to be. Okay, so now we understand what Torah and Tefillin do. Tefillin is sort of like the second best, but Torah is the model of drawing down the spiritual into the physical, which is, after all, the whole concept of the Shvuah. The Shvuah is giving him a boost of spiritual energy, but in order that it should be absorbed in a way that he can actually feel it and use it, we need that grasping that holy object. And why not any holy object? Why not his lulav and esrog? Why? Because specifically Torah and Tefillin, which represent the drawing down of Meichen to Midos. Tes Vav, der Tam verwas bei a Talmid Chochem is a filo lechatchila genug, oiber halt Tefillin in hand b'shas der Shvuah. Why is it enough that if he's a Talmid Chochem, he can use Tefillin even as a first choice? Because we said Tefillin is only second best to Sefer Torah. But with the Talmid Chochem, you could use Tefillin as a first choice. Es steht in Zohar, as a Talmid Chochem wird angerufen Shabbos. It says in Zohar that a Torah scholar is called Shabbos. He's called Shabbos. It's a story. Shouldn't be telling extra stories on the day when we have so many Sichas, but the B'aal Shem Tov once saw somebody breaking Shabbos, and he was very troubled because he taught you don't see something unless you have it in yourself. And he was trying to think, where did he have even bedakos on a subtle level Shabbos desecration in his own life? And then he remembered that the Zohar says that a Talmid Chacham is called Shabbos. He remembers that he once allowed somebody to mistreat him, and that was a Chilul Shabbos in a metaphorical sense. Okay, so Talmid Chacham are called Shabbos. An Undeitung of them is Faran Euch in Gemara, and not only in Zohar, but you also find in Gemara a similar concept. The Gemara erzählt, als es ist gekommen, a Talmid Chacham zu Gast, hat man ihm gegeben a große Suda. A scholar came as a guest, and they fed him a big meal. Hat der Talmid Chacham gefragt, von wann hat man genommen die Suda? He said, where do you get such a big meal from? Man hat sich doch auf ihm nicht gericht. You didn't know I was coming. Hat man ihm geantwortet, as das hat man zugegräht auf Shabbos. They said, no, this was the Shabbos meal that we had ready. Und als ist gekommen, but when you, the Talmid Chacham, showed up, hat man ihm weggegeben die Shabbos dicke Suda. We gave you the Shabbos meal. Similar concept. The Talmid Chacham is Shabbos. So the meal that you were going to have for Shabbos, okay, you have it for the Talmid Chacham. Shaykh Shabbos mit Talmid Chacham is, what's the connection between Torah scholar and Shabbos? Well, Shabbos is man abgescheit von wachadike Beschäftigungen. On Shabbos, you are separated from weekly mundane business. Das heißt, von den Jahren von der Chassidic Welt, separate from material things. Und a Talmid Chacham is similar. Is abgescheit von der Chassidic Welt. He's also separate from the material world. That's why Talmid Chacham also does not need a Torah scroll to make an oath. Warum der Inyan von Sefer Torah wie Eben der Mann? Because what is it to Sefer Torah? Like we explained, is zu verbinden dem Keach von Eben mit dem Welt. The Sefer Torah is the connector between the spiritual powers and the physical world. But since he is already in a sort of transcendent state where he's removed from the world, he doesn't need to bring it down as low. He doesn't need the full power of the Sefer Torah. He can manage it with tefillin. So tefillin darf aber euch Talmid Chacham ankommen. Yeah, he needs something. He needs at least the tefillin. Weil tefillin is doch meshabed sein Kopf und Hart, because tefillin subjugates his head and his heart. Und das tut auf dem Verbund von dem Keach von eben mit dem Menschen, and that facilitates the connection of that higher power to the person. Andere schwer Sefer Torah, was ihr Inyan is, der Verbund mit Verbund von dem dosen Keach mit Welt. Oh, we distinguish here that tefillin is enough to bring down that spiritual power, to connect it to the person. But Sefer Torah is even more powerful. That brings that spiritual power down into connection with the world, which is even lower. That's outside of the person's environment, the physical world itself. The Talmid Chacham is abgeshet. He's sort of aloof from the world, so he doesn't need to bring the spiritual power down as low. Okay. Tezayin. Das, was bei Avraham Avinu ist bei der Schwur nicht gewinnt, kein Sefer Torah und Tefillin, nor die mitzvos Milah Davke. So this, that Avraham, when he administered the oath to Eliezer, he didn't have a Sefer Torah, he didn't have Tefillin. He only had his Bris Milah. Wird man es verstehen durch der Akdome von der bewusster Kasche, wie bald es Avraham Avinu hat doch mit keinem gewinnt die ganze Torah. Für was hat gewahrt mit mitzvos Milah, bis der Eberste wird ihm heißen. Famous question. Avraham Avinu performed all of the mitzvahs without being commanded. All of the Avos did all of the mitzvahs without being commanded. Why did he wait for Milah? Why didn't he do that until he was commanded? The teres of them is, but the answer is, leit dem was is bewusst wegen dem Uftu von Matan Torah auf die mitzvahs, welche die Avos haben keinem gewähnt noch früher. You have to understand the difference between the mitzvahs that exist, or the mitzvahs the way they exist after Matan Torah, and the way the mitzvahs existed pre-Matan Torah. Far Matan Torah is given, die Gzeras b'nei Roimi lo yordu l'Surya b'nei Surya lo yalu l'Reimi. Like the Medrash says, metaphorically, that before Matan Torah there was a king who decreed that the residents of Rome won't go down to Syria and the residents of Syria won't go up to Rome. Thus, heißt, it's a symbolism. As soll nicht sein kein Verbund von Ruchnius mit Gashmius, that spirituality and physicality are two separate planes, never the twin shall meet. Und bei Matan Torah is die dozike Geseda botte geworden. But Matan Torah was the nullification of that decree. As a geworden a Möglichkeit of a Verbund, it became possible for spiritual and material to mix. Matan Torah hat aufgetan, as Oiba Yid is mekayme mitzvah mit a Gashmische Gesach, wird der Dover Gashmi heilig. After Matan Torah became possible that if a Jew uses a physical object to do a mitzvah, that physical object becomes holy. Holiness is a spiritual designation. Before Matan Torah, holiness only existed in the spiritual realm. So there's no such thing as a physical thing that's holy. That's an oxymoron, physical and holy. Matan Torah is mechadish the concept that there could be physical objects and they could also be holy. Die mitzvos, die Avos haben mit keinem gewähnt, Chotsch, die haben es getan, in Gashmische Sachen. Now, mitzvahs that the Avos did, even though, yes, they did perform them in some physical way, hat das aber zum Gashmi allein kein Sheiches nicht gehabt. But it didn't have any connection to the physicality itself. The Gashmi is geblieben in seine Chumrias azoi wie früher. The physical object would remain mundane. Noch Matan Torah wird durch der Mitzvah der Gashmi allein Kodesh. But after Matan Torah, now any Jew does a mitzvah, the physical object that is used in the mitzvah becomes holy. Und der Fall bleibt über auf a kedusha euch noch in mekayim sein die mitzvah, and that's why even after he performs the mitzvah, the object retains some degree of holiness. Der Tam darauf ist, weil der Kiyam mitzvah bei die Ovis ist gewesen mit sehr eigenem Koyach. Hat das nicht gekannt durchdringen dem Gashmi, also wie das ist noch Matan Torah. So because the Ovis were doing the mitzvahs with their own power, which is an illustration of their incredible sensitivity that they even knew to do the mitzvahs without being commanded explicitly to do them. So it's wonderful that they intuited to do the mitzvahs, but the limitation was it was coming from their own power. So the mitzvah did not have that effect on the world. After Matan Torah, where the mitzvahs are being commanded to us, it's coming from Hashem's power. Now, any yid who does a mitzvah, it has a lasting effect on the physicality, which is entailed in doing the mitzvah. Okay. As a doch Maisa Avisim Labonim. We said earlier this concept of Maisa Avisim and Labonim, that what the Avis do in their lifetime creates a pattern, sort of like fractals in mathematics, like repeating patterns in our lives. Another thing is, it's not just it sets up a pattern. It empowers us. It gives us the ability to follow in that pattern. Hat man die Avis gegeben a mitzvah, ähnlich zu die mitzvahs was noch Matan Torah. The Avis had to have one mitzvah that was similar, not completely identical, because they're obviously two different eras of reality. Before Matan Torah and after Matan Torah, that was like the watershed event. Reality completely changed. But you might even say there was more of a change in the world before Matan Torah to after Matan Torah than there was a change in the world before creation to after creation. But that's another discussion for another time. And yet, the Avis had to have one mitzvah because of Maisa Avis Sim Labonim that our forefathers have to have a template for the patterns that we follow. They had to have one mitzvah at least that was similar to mitzvahs that are done after Matan Torah. Und das ist die Mitzvah von Milah. The one mitzvah that the Aves had that resembled the mitzvahs, all of the mitzvahs that we do after Sinai, was the mitzvah of circumcision. Was min macht dem gashmi kodesh, because circumcision really is like the paradigm of making the physical holy. It's part of the physical body that's normally associated with very physical urges, and the whole thing is made holy. Und die Kedusha is nicht nur b'shas dem kiyama mitzvah. The Kedusha isn't just at the time the mitzvah is performed, nor sie verbleibt euch auf später, remains permanent. Also wie die mitzvah von noch Matan Torah. And by the way, that's the way all mitzvahs are after Matan Torah. A raya of them is, was b'shas der Shvuah hat gesagt, sim no yodcha tachas rechi. That's why Avraham told Eliezer, place your hand on my Bris Milah, weil die Kedusha is geblieben euch auf später, because the holiness of that mitzvah remained after, and it was there in that body part. Afilo nachdem wie hat schon mekayim gewen mitzvah, even after he did the mitzvah. Mitzvos Milah is darüber gewesen, andere von die andere mitzvahs, welche die Avis haben mekayim gewen. So circumcision was different, it was unique among all the mitzvahs that the Avis did. Weil das ist gewesen durch Hatzivui von dem Eibischen, because it came about from a command from Hashem, not from their own intuition. Und der Vater hat Avraham Avinu gewahrt mit der dosike mitzvah, bis der Eibischte wird ihm heißen. That's why Avraham waited. Of course, he was intuitively aware of Bris Milah. He knew if he could eat matzah and Pesach hundreds of years before the Exodus, he could know about a Bris Milah. But he waited until he was commanded, because it's a one-shot deal. And he wanted to do it as a commandment. He wanted to have that aspect of the physical being affected by a power greater than himself. Weil die mitzvah is in ganzen Andrisch von die andere mitzvahs, was Avraham hat mekayim gewen. Circumcision was completely different than any of the other mitzvahs that Avraham did. Und auf dem hat man gedarf haben a keich milmaila. For that, he needed a special power from above. Like dem that man verstehen, for was Avrahams Shvuah is gewen durch mitzvahs Milah. Chotsch, jetzt darf man darauf haben a Sefer Torah. Now we can understand why did Avram's oath that he administered to Eliezer entail the circumcision, even though today we would use a Sefer Torah. Der Inyan von mitzvahs Milah demol is given zu verbinden, amshach sein Kedusha in Welt bis dem Gashmi. The concept of Avram's circumcision then was this concept of bringing down spirituality, holiness, into the physical. Dasselbe, was Matan Torah hat aufgetan und was Torah tut auf jetzt. Which is the same thing that Matan Torah accomplished and the same thing that our mitzvahs do now. bringing spirituality into the physical. Weil demol is mitzvos Milah gewesen der klolus inyan von Torah. Because then, basically, the only mitzvah that they had, which embodied the nature of mitzvahs post Matan Torah, was mitzvos Milah. So, really, what in that era before Matan Torah, what was their Sefer Torah, so to speak? What was the ultimate embodiment of Torah? Like for us, it's the embodiment of the Torah is the Sefer Torah. For them, the only thing they had, which was the embodiment of Torah, if we're looking at Torah as that power that is brought down into the physical, the only thing they had that did that was mitzvos Milah. Because it was the only thing they were commanded. Leut dem wird men euch verstehen, for was men lernt es ab, nor auf der Schwur von Meide B'mitzvos und nicht auf die übrige Schwurs. Now, this is fun. Remember, our first question was, how come... Is that our first question or our second question? I gotta flip back. Where do we have the questions? The first question was, the Kashifus Teisvus Frekt. Yeah. Why do we learn... Yeah, well, that was our first question. Why do we learn Meide B'mitzvos? Why not other types of shvus that are also made? Okay, so where are we? What? Okay, Leut dem wird man euch verstehen. Für was man lernt das ab, nur auf der Schwur von Meide B'mitzvos und nicht auf die übrige Schwurs, weil die Schwur von Meide B'mitzvos is negeh zu klal Avodas Hashem. Okay, we're now going to learn, I guess you could call this a homiletical meaning of Meide B'mitzvos. I explained earlier very quickly. Meide B'mitzvos means, guy says, you owe me 200. I don't owe you 200. I owe you 100. So he's Meide, he admits B'mitzvos partial admission. So from the story of Avraham, the Gemara Shavuos learns about the requirements for an oath taken by someone who makes a partial admission. Interesting. Why not other types of oaths? So here's what it means for us in our service of God. B'shas men bakumt der Keach von eben in dem Inyan von Meide B'mitzvos werden schon b'meila verricht die Inyanim Pratim. And also, we're learning from this how when we get that extra boost, which we said a shvua, an oath represents getting the extra boost, how that has to do with, what does that have to do with a partial admission? The Erklärung von dem Inyan von Meide B'mitzvos in ruchnistige Aveda is, so what does it mean on Meide B'mitzvos in spiritual terms? Like this. Neshama shenasat to be the neshama was der Eibishter hat in mir reingegeben, ist das bichdei, der Mensch soll durch deine Veda kommen zu an Aliyah. Hashem gave me a pure soul. Well, for what purpose? So it should have an elevation. He sent it down here, you would have said to have an elevation. Steht euch in Medisch wegen jeden Prat von der Aveda mi akdemoni v'shali. Like it says, it's a lashon pasuk from Iyov, I believe. But Hashem prefaces, and I pay back. As it Eibishter git koyach a yidden of yeder mitzvah befrat. Hashem gives every yid the power to do every mitzvah. So when you're doing the mitzvah, you're paying him back with the power that he loaned you. Und die Keiches, was der Eibishter gibt, seine auf Borg. It's a loan. It's on loan. All the powers that you have are on loan. Mont as men soll das abzahlen. And Hashem says, pay me back. Das heißt, euch nutzen sie in Aveda, which means use these powers for service of Hashem. Okay. So remember, a Meide B'mitzvos usually is like a monetary claim. So we're setting up a little scenario here of like a monetary situation between the person and Hashem. Hashem gave you a loan. What's the loan? All of your talents and your powers and your strengths and your resources and your connections or whatever it is that you have, that's all on loan. And you're you have to pay it back. How do you pay it back? When you use those abilities to serve him. That's how you pay him back. So he gave you a certain talent, you use that talent to glorify Hashem. That's called paying back the loan. Okay. Wie der Rebbe der Schwerk, Admur hat übergesagt. Like the Friedrich Rebbe said, in Namen von die Friedrich Rebbeim, in the name of the previous Rebbeim, dem Teich von dem Loschen hakofes, Hakafas, dancing around on Simchas Torah is called Hakafas. Azavi Tishrei is a Chedesh Klali, Chedesh Hashvi von Loshen Musba, ungesättigt, Mikol Tov. We actually mentioned this in the Sicha in Parshas Preciousness a few weeks ago. Tishrei is called Chedesh HaShvi, the 7th month. Shvi is also muspa, satisfied, satiated. It's full of spiritual energy, which you draw down during that month and then you use for the rest of the year. Men zettigt on demol de Yidden euch mit keiches auf a ganz Jahr. So during Tishrei, a person gets a boost of energy, which he uses for the rest of the year. Was megitem ba'kofa, and that's given ba'hakofa. Ba'hakofa means on loan, on credit. It's on credit. You know, like you run up a tab at the store and then you pay, then they send you a bill at the end of the month. Here's how much you owe us. Avborg. Avborg means ba'kafa, and a credit. Men mont es soll sein Aveda, as if you stayed by Avraham and v'yelich l'masav, and you have to, like Avraham, he went back and he retraced his steps on his journey, as by sein Zurückweg, on his way back, hat upgezahlt seine Alvois, he paid back all of his loans. That's why he went back to the same taverns when he came back from Mitzrayim. He went to the same taverns that he visited on the way down there, because when he went down there, he was poor. When he came back, he was rich. He had to pay all the bills to all the creditors. So hakafes means loans, that Simchas Torah, you're dancing, and Hashem is giving you spiritual energy for the year. But now you got to pay it back. How do you pay it back? By using it. Chotschas die Keiches geht men von eben, von deswegen mit dem Yetzahara, was chabt sich herein in Jeden, ist recht, dass soll an heuben a bissel likenen und teinen als Keuchive etzem Yodi Yoseli as a chaylazet. Now, even though the reality is this is all given on credit from Hashem, and Hashem gave him all this extra spiritual energy, it's possible the Yetzer Hara is going to come and get the person to start lying. And he's going to say, yeah, Hashem gave me a boost, but you're going to say everything I have is from Hashem? It's not all from Hashem. Some of it's me. Some of it's me. Als sein eigener Keach und Starkheit hat ihm gebracht das, was vermocht. That his own ability, his own strength brought him what he has. Käufer akel einer was liken den Ganzen. A person who completely denies, sagt die Gemara, as das kann nicht sein. There's no such thing, actually. Weil die Chazaka is, as a mensch vet nit, interesting psychological insight from Chazal, as a mensch vet nit sein as ponim far sein B'aal Chayv. A person will not be that chutzpahdik in front of his creditor. Psychologically, Chazal say, nobody's going to say, what? I don't owe you anything. He's going to say, I don't know, if I owed you anything, it was probably half of that amount. Like in Chas v'Shalom, in Eibishtin kenitayid. So what's the nimshal here? A Jew is not going to completely deny Hashem. He's not going to say, Hashem had nothing to do with my success. V'omer hat doch an neshama was afilo b'shas zindigt, is die ba'amna itay yisbarach, the neshama zet ständig Göttlichkeit. Even when he's sinning, the soul is seeing godliness. So it's impossible to completely deny. Sie is bifnei B'aal Choivei, standing in front of the creditor. Und chazaka in Odom may is ponav bifnei B'aal Choivei. And we know a person will not be so chutzpahdik in front of his creditor. Afilu a kal shebakalim, even a really light person, a morally weak, morally person who takes morality very lightly. Even that person won't completely lie in front of their creditor. Hat nit die hoaza zu likenen in ganzen dem chayv, meinendik as his keichevei zum yadi. He won't completely deny. Nor was, but rather what? Is a made of mitzvos. He'll give a partial admission. In gewisse Protem halt as es keichevei zum yadi. Sein Keich und sein Starkheit. In certain areas, he'll say, well, that one I definitely did myself. In gewissen Jahren meinte, as is allein, as is allein a Balabayas und kann tun, was will. Certain areas, he says, look, I'm the balabas, I'm the owner here, I earned this, I built this, and Hashem doesn't have a say. I get to do my own thing here, because look, that thing Hashem gave me, I owe him. I got to use it his way. But this thing, that was my thing, so I can do how I want. Listen what the Rebbe is describing here. Okay, listen to this guy. Davent und lernt Take. Yeah, he davens, he learns Torah. Aber noch in davenen und noch in lernen, tracht but then after davening and learning, he thinks. Hat schön dem Eibishten abgegeben sein Chayv. I just paid Hashem. I paid him. Und jetzt ist schön Kirchweih zum Jade in die Ibrike likened there. But now, the rest of the day has to do with my own power, meaning to say he's lying or is denying about the rest. So he admits there's a certain obligation to daven, to learn Torah, but that obligation has its limits. As isurim is doch nit over. He says like this, listen, I'm not going to do any avedas. I'm not going to break any prohibitions. Wie der Lashon in Maimer is, v'lei over aveda miyamav. Mefrat is lernt Torah, and is mekai mitzvos. He's a frum guy. He's not going to do avedas. He learns Torah, does mitzvos. Hat doch abgegeben dem Eibishten als was kommt. So he thinks to himself, I gave Hashem everything he deserves. Und die Ibrike in sein eigener Koyach is sein eigener Koyach. The rest is his own power, the person's own power. Sagt man ihm, als alles, was vermogt und sein ganze Metzies is nicht sein Koyach und starke. But we tell him, no, everything you have, in fact, your entire existence, it's not from yourself. Nur muss made design as das Ganze gehört zum Eibishten. No, you have to admit the whole thing is from Hashem. Und Mele muss als abzahlen. You have to pay Hashem everything. Don't tell me, what are you talking about? I give Hashem so much. Every day I learn. Every day I daven. Trust me, I'm good with my debts. What are you talking about? If you spent every single second doing nothing but serving Hashem, you would just be breaking even. And it doesn't mean you have to daven and learn all day. It could mean that you work also, but even in the way you're working, that's also Avedas Hashem. The point is, don't tell me that you're going to carve out some time for Hashem and think that you're not still indebted. If you use every single thing you have and every moment that you were given to serve Hashem, you're just paying your bills. Und auf dem ist der Schwur von Loschen Seivea Zattigkeit, was man gibt dem Koyach von eben, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Israel. And that's why we need the Shvua. Okay, so the Meidem Miktzah situation here. Hashem gave the person a loan. He gave him everything that the person has. The person says, I admit Hashem gave me a lot. He gave me a lot. I'm definitely indebted to Hashem, to an extent. So he's a Meidem Miktzah. So we say to him, dude, you know what you need right now? You need a shvua. You need an oath. You need an oath, because the person who's a Meidem Miktzah has to take an oath. The oath here means, like we said, shvua, seveya, it's an extra boost to satiate him with extra spirituality. So he has to give this extra koyach, was man gibt dem a koyach von eben, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ezer, Hashem helps him out, der Eibishter helft. As man soll haben, die Überzeugung, als kein eigene is im Ganzen nicht da. Hashem helps him out that he should be convinced that there's nothing that's his own. Und memele muss man von alle Inyanim von der Welt machen Elokus. Therefore, everything that you encounter, you have to make it godly. Warum die ganze Welt gehört zum Eibishten? Because the whole world is really Hashem's. Und wenn man nimmt dem Koyach und man ist das Mamshich in Welt, so when you take that power that the Shvur does, and you draw that power into the world, nachdem wie man macht a bracha, was bracha is meloshen am shacha lamata, meloshen am mavrich, am shacha lamata. You make a bracha, which bracha means blessing, but it also means like havracha, like you take a vine and put it into the ground to make a new vine. So it means drawing down. Demot vert v'haaretz nosen livnei Adam, bekommt a mitzvos a tale was vert seine. Then v'haaretz nosen livnei Adam, Hashem gives the world to the person. Then He does give you a portion for yourself. Yudches. Azoi wie in a Shvua Gashmis darf man halten a Sefer Torah oder a Koponim Tefillin kidei men soll bakommen dem Keich von eben. Azoi is euch in Avodah Ruchnis. Okay. Now just like with the Shvua, you have to hold either a Torah scroll or a pair of Tefillin. Same thing, spiritually, lechatchila darf sein der Inyan von Sefer Torah Horven Tag und Nacht in Torah. So what does it mean to hold a Sefer Torah? It means to toil day and night in Torah. Was Torah gibt dem Keach auf zu verbinden Welt mit Göttlichkeit, like we said before, we even declared that Torah gives us the power to connect the above to the below, to connect the godly to the worldly. As der Uftu von Matan Torah is given zu verbinden Gashmis mit Göttlichkeit, like we said before, Matan Torah came to give us the ability to connect godliness to the world. Das ist doch euch der Inyan von Torah Pshutai, Torah Meloshen Heira. And that's also the concept of Torah in the literal sense. The word Torah means Heira, etymologically. Torah means instruction. Heira means instruction. Torah means instruction. An Anweisung in Yiddish. Instruction. Direction. Torah weist an, wie soll auszunutzen jeden Inyan von Welt, Leut dem Ratzen von dem Eibishten. Torah shows us how to use everything in the world according to Hashem's will. Nur ob man kann nicht ausführen, als man soll a ganz Tag harven in Torah. Now, if you cannot manage to learn Torah all day, so al kolponim in Anhalbtag sein der Shibud von Meich and heart. So at least at the beginning of the day, you should subjugate your mind and heart durch mitzvos Tefillin. You do that through Tefillin. Und das soll sein der Anhalb und die Anweisung für dem ganzen Tag, and then that beginning of Tefillin, that shows the way for the rest of the day. As alle seine Geschäften durch dem Tag seinen Gebet auf dem Shibud von Meich und Hart was in Anhalbtag. That for the rest of the day, everything should be built on the foundation of subjugation of the mind and heart to Hashem that was done at the beginning of the day through putting on Tefillin. Und der Inyan von halten das Sefer Torah und Tefillin in ebendemanten Sinn peilt auf soll sein ameide bekulei. And when he'll hold the Sefer Torah or hold the Tefillin in the way that we just described, meaning learn as much as you can, and if whatever you can't learn, at least you put on Tefillin in the morning, that turns him into a ameide bekulei, someone who makes a complete admission. As als gehört zum Eibishten, he admits everything belongs to Hashem, not just some things, everything. Wird schön bemeile versporen die Shvuos habitui und andere Shvuos. And now he doesn't have to make any other Shvuos, meaning he doesn't need any other infusion of help. He has all the help he needs by learning and putting on Tefillin. Leit dem wird euch sein verstandig, was die Schwur lernt man ab von der Schwur von Avraham Avinu ben der Chassene von Yitzchakin mitten mit Rivka. And now we understand why the original context for this teaching is the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka. We were asking before, like, why is that the context that we learn this all from? Was das ist der Inyan von Yichud Ma und Ban. Okay, Kabbalistic concept. Ma and Ban are different numbers, 45, 52. When you spell Hashem's name with different miloyim, where you spell out the letters you spell each letter of Hashem's four-letter name as if it's a word. You know, when you play Scrabble and you can spell out a letter. You know how to do that? Like you write E-N for the letter N, let's say. So Yud is Yud, Vav, Daled. You spell out, Yud Ke Vav Ke, so you spell it out. Now there are different ways to spell the different letters. Like Hey could be Hey Aleph, Hey Yud, Hey. Depending how you spell the letters, you get different permutations, different numbers. Ma and Ban, Ma is actually the gematria of Adam, and Ban is the gematria of Behema. These are different levels in Seder Shtalshlis, and they represent the masculine and the feminine energies. And he calls it here a yichud klali. Basically, everything is about yichudim. It's about reunification of energies, and the primary energies that need to be unified are symbolized by ma and ban. So marriage, which is the unification of the masculine and the feminine, represents this idea. When we talk about uniting, like we're talking about uniting Hashem with the world, uniting the infinite with the finite, the spiritual with the physical, that's yichud ma'uban. So the whole concept of mitzvos in Torah is yichud ma'uban. So the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka represents not just their marriage, which obviously, as their descendants, we owe a lot to the fact, if our ancestors didn't get married, then we wouldn't be here. But it also represents, Yitzchak and Rivka represent the unification of these two fundamental energies in the world. V'yes is bavus b'sifrei Kabbalah, and this is a known concept in the Kabbalistic books. B'meila lernt men derfun euch ab wegen meide b'miktzos, was das is euch a klalistische inyan in Aveda. So the Rebbe says, meide b'miktzos is a very general concept. It's the whole idea of whether or not a person admits that everything is from Hashem or not. And that's related to another very general concept, which is the whole concept of Yichud Ma'uban, which is represented in Chumash by the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka. Okay, good test. The Anweisung, Lepoil, von dem ganzen Inyan is, here's the practical teaching that comes from this whole concept. Aber Shas, men geht der Reis in Welt, darf men wissen, a klalistische Inyan. When you go out into the world, you have to know a general concept. As the Yesod von Aveda is, men soll mitnehmen a Sefer Torah mit sich. The foundation of serving Hashem is you have to bring your Sefer Torah. What does it mean, bring your Sefer Torah? Horeven in Torah, a wiffel es is nor da leit dem Shulchan Aruch Zeit. You have to learn Torah to the maximum amount of time that Shulchan Aruch requires. The laws of Hilchos Talmud Torah defines how much, not everyone has to learn the same amount of time, but whatever your obligation is to learn Torah, to learn that, max that out. And in the Ibereke Zeit, and then in any other time, soll al kol panim sein die Hanhoga mit Shibud HaMelech v'Alev. The rest of the time, at least, you should behave in a way where it's recognizable how your mind and heart are subjugated to Hashem, meaning tefillin. That das euch geben dem keach of machen alle seine gashmis de genyonim kilim to alakus, and that will give you the power that everything you do that's physical, you'll turn it into something godly, which again is that whole concept of bringing the spiritual into the physical. Okay, and being a moide bekulai, to admit that everything you encounter in your life has to be turned into some form of service of Hashem. You cannot say that there's anything in your life that's secular or mundane and can just remain that way. Hashem doesn't need to have my whole life. What do you mean? He gave you your whole life. Everything you encounter, you give it back to him. Okay. Chof. There's like 3 asterisks here, which means like it's its own Sicha, but it's actually a continuation. It's from the same Fabrengen, from Shabbos Parshas Chayei Sarah Tavshin Tez Zayin. Okay. We're almost done. Next week's even longer. In Heintige Seder hypt sich an zu reden wegen dem Anheb von der Geula. In this week's Parshas Chayei Sarah, it starts speaking about redemption. In the Friedeke Seder redt wegen Golus, wegen 9 years Baaretz. In the previous Parshas Vayera was talking about Golus, because it said the Canaanites were in the land. And Leut wieder Zal sagen, Shahaya heilig v'kevish chulo, fleck gain un einnehmen. Aber in Heint, okay, so Avraham was going around trying to conquer up the land. Aber in Heintige Seder redt sich schon wegen der Geula. But in this Parsha, we're already in a redemption state. As Avraham Avinu hat abgekauft a Feld in Eretz Yisrael by Ephraim. Und das is gewen für die Augen von die Bnei Ches. In this week's Parsha, Avraham actually legally acquired some land in Eretz Yisrael, specifically in Hebron. He bought it from Ephraim. And he did it in front of the Bnei Ches, the Hittites. Was alle haben made given as das gehört to Avraham, and everybody admitted, yeah, we saw it, he purchased it, it belongs to Avraham. And unhype von der klalistic geula von alle Yidden, and that actually is the beginning of the redemption of all Jews. Chatscher hat abgezahlt der Fahr arbe shekel kesef. Steht aber wegen them. Now, although he paid 400 silver coins for this, it says, "Ad nit nor is Ephraim durch dem nit zugekommen kein Meile nor andere noch exarin." This did not benefit Ephraim; it actually brought him down. Dermit hat men bei ihm zugenommen von sein Namen dem Eis Vav. Ephraim actually lost his Vav, which shows a spiritual descent in him. Wie steht in dem Sefer Pnei Raza, like it says in this, well, the Rebbe says a Sefer from the Rishon, as durch die 400 shekel kesef was Avraham hat, Avraham Avinu hat abgezahlt, hat jeder Yid bekommen a chelik in Eretz Yisrael. Now, through the 400 silver coins that Avraham paid Ephraim for the burial site for Sarah in Hebron, through that purchase, every Jew became a possessor of a portion of Eretz Yisrael. And this particular Rishon that I was quoting makes a calculation. Leit dem cheshbon von zera choymer so'irim v'chamishim shekel kesef. This is an amount of property. It talks about, it's from Parshas Chayei Sarah, where it's talking about valuations of land that are donated. So this is a way of calculating a portion of land. So he goes according to that calculation. He says, as far 400 shekel haben 60 ribu Yidden bekommen in Eretz Yisrael, jeden einer an Amma al Amma. So he says, if you have 600,000 Jews, which is the number of heads of household that left Mitzrayim, and that's the number of general souls. Obviously, it speaks about in Kabbalah how there are tributaries that come off of each of those souls, because obviously there's more than 600,000 Jews. But if you divide that amount of land, or that purchase price, by the 600,000 general souls, then he comes out with a calculation. I didn't see how he does the math, so you have to just take the Rebbe's word for it here. Maybe we have an accountant, somebody who's like mathematically inclined, who could go look it up. Yeah, we have an accountant? Who's an accountant? You're an accountant? Who? You're an accountant? Oh, I have a job for you. Okay. So you have to go look up this Pnei Raza, and we have to find out what math he uses. But the Untershashura, the bottom line is you have to come up with an Amma al Amma, a square cubit of land for each of the 600,000 general souls. But this is the concept that because of that purchase, that every Jew already has a piece of Eretz Yisrael. And that's the beginning of Geula. Die Geula hat sich noch angeheben damals. So redemption started way back then already. Men darf bloß herabnehmen de halamis v'ester, and we just have to remove the concealments, the coverings. Und bringen die Geula lamata begilui durch Mashiach tzedkin v'mehirim v'yomeinu mamash, and we just have to bring the redemption down here. The redemption already exists. We just have to bring it down here through Mashiach, speedily in our days, literally. And that's it. Baruch Hashem. Finished. God willing, we'll be here next week for more. We're here every week, Sundays 10:30 at Soulward's house. Thank you for joining us. I'm kind of exhausted. That was long. It was a marathon. So we're going to end the stream. All right. I'm going to get up.